brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP LP 101.
The Eau Claire City Council meeting is now in session. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Beaton.
Here.
Berge.
Here.
Christofferson.
Here.
Emmanuel.
Here.
Gregert.
Here.
Klinkhammer.
Here.
Lohr.
Here.
Weld.
Here.
Worthman.
Here.
Zhang.
Here.
All right, good evening, everyone. To my council members here in chambers and to my council members joining us remotely. This is our Monday, August 10th virtual meeting of the Eau Claire City Council. Again, I want to extend a sincere welcome to all of you joining us. And again, for those of you who would like to address the City Council this evening, you will need to join the meeting as an attendee on a computer, tablet, or smartphone using the link provided on the city website. The Eau Claire City Council conducts public hearings, listening sessions, and public discussion where residents in our community are invited and encouraged to ask questions and weigh in on the important decisions that we'll be making tomorrow afternoon in our legislative session or in coming weeks and months ahead. We want to thank Valley MediaWorks for live streaming this proceeding. To watch, please visit valleymediaworks.org or visit channel 994 on Spectrum Cable. It is also simulcast at 101.9 FM. And you can find past meetings on YouTube under the Chippewa Valley MediaWorks channel. If you plan to address the council this evening, I will briefly review the protocol. Once an agenda item is introduced, staff will present on that item, and following the presentation, council may have questions to clarify the issue. We then will open the item for public input. Once the item is open for comment, please raise your hand on the WebEx screen, and I will call on you in the order in which the requests come to speak are received. When it is your turn to comment, I will unmute you and ask you to please state your name and your address, and then begin sharing your comments. We welcome each of you to speak for up to 5 minutes. I will then ask you to bring your comments to a close. I will then ask you to lower your hand, and you will then be muted, but are welcome to stay in line to listen into the rest of the meeting or share a comment on any of the other public hearings or during public commentary period. There are times when council members will ask you a follow-up question, so please give us a moment before disconnecting. Again, if you wish to speak on an item that is not listed on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment period. Lastly, if you're not comfortable speaking in public, you can fill out a comment form on the city website, and those comments will be shared with council members ahead of our legislative session tomorrow. As always, you can email or call the council members outside of this meeting, and our contact information can be found on the city website. With that introduction, we will get on to our first order of business. There are 4 items on tonight's agenda. First item is a public hearing on a charter ordinance relating to the City Council and the reapportionment of the aldermanic districts of the City of Eau Claire. Good evening, Ms. Reapel.
Good evening. The Schunk and Holzinger annexations are on your agenda for approval at tomorrow's meeting. These annexations each require a new voting ward as they are in different state assembly districts than the adjacent city property. This creates Ward 80 in Aldermanic District number 4 and Ward 81 in Aldermanic District number 2. There are 2 items on tomorrow's agenda. One is a resolution creating the new wards, and the second is a charter ordinance adding the new wards to the aldermanic districts. The polling location for Ward 80 is Calvary Church, and Ward 81 is Cedar Brook Church. With that, I will take any questions.
Are there any questions from council for Ms. Repo? I do not see any. Is there any comments from the public? And I do not see any. Agenda item number 2 is a public hearing on an ordinance rezoning a property located to the northwest of Oxford Avenue and Cameron Street and to amend the general development plan for Phase 2 for an apartment building with a reduced setback for a project known as The Current, formerly the Cannery Trail Residence. Good evening, Mr. Allen.
Good evening, Council President Weld and members of the council. Again, before you this evening is a request to approve amendments to the general development plan and approve the site plan for a 4-story Phase 2 of the project now known as The Current, formerly known as Cannery Trail Residences. Go to the next slide, please. It's item 5 as you're looking at this map from the Planning Commission at their meeting last week. Thank you. There's an aerial of the properties in question. Again, Phase 1 is on the north, and Phase 2, which is looking to have the amendments here, is on the south. Thank you. This shows more specifically kind of the site plan outline of the second building, Phase 2. We can go to the next drawing. And here shows some of the elevations. We go to the next. And the next as well, thank you. And we'll park on the next one if we don't mind. Thank you. This shows the view on the east side of the building of Phase 2, which is along Oxford Avenue. So you're essentially looking to the southwest from this viewpoint. Again, the applicant, who is known as, still as, Cannery Trail Residences, Inc., is proposing an amended general development plan with a site plan for Phase 2 of this multifamily residential project, again now known as The Current. If you may recall, the project was granted approval for rezoning with the general development plan back in January of last year, and a final site plan in August of last year. And this coincided with the timing for its successful competitive application for low-income housing tax credits that was awarded earlier this year. Again, that is focused on the Phase 2 before you hear this evening. Phase 1, again, is immediately north of Phase 2, currently under construction with 71 market rate housing units in a 3-story building. Phase 2 was also originally proposed at 3 stories and 41 housing units, but the amended plan, as you see here, calls for 4 stories and now 43 units. 36 of the units would be reserved for residents at 30 to 60% of county median income, and it would be a mix of 8 studios, 14 1-bedrooms, 15 2-bedrooms, and 6 3-bedrooms. Phase 2 will have access to 51 vehicle parking stalls and 62 bicycle parking spaces. Setbacks for Phase 2 remain consistent with original approval, 15 feet from the building facade to Oxford Avenue, as you see here, on the east, and 17 feet on the west, 7 feet from the north property line. But as you see here, the spacing between the 2 buildings is approximately 20 feet between Phase 2 there on the left and Phase 1 under construction now on the right. The applicant did provide a narrative regarding the proposed changes to Phase 2. They did note that the primary purpose for the building modifications, including expanding to 4 stories on the south side, as you see there to the left, kind of lighter colored elevation on the left there is that kind of partial 4th story, as they refer to it. Again, the primary purpose is to fit the range and mix of housing unit types and to include the required community space. Again, as noted, there'll be 6 3-bedroom units, so that ends up taking up larger footprint. And due to the tight spacing on the south property line, they chose to go up instead of trying to reconfigure lot lines and such to spread outward horizontally. So we see vertical expansion here in the proposal. With that, again, engineering comments and conditions as well remain unchanged. And so the site plan approval conditions would also remain unchanged. Again, this was presented to the Plan Commission at their meeting last week and has been recommended for approval moving forward here before you with the public hearing tonight and consideration tomorrow. And I'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Allen from council? Councilmember Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, President Weld, and thank you, Mr. Allen. I don't know if we could go back to the site plan slide, but I had a question about the sidewalk on the west side of the building. Between phase 1 and phase 2, it doesn't appear that they connect. And I guess maybe the applicant would be able to answer this too, but essentially, are those access sidewalks for the courtyard, and do they connect like via a courtyard, or are they kind of separated from each other for a reason? That's my question.
That's a very good question. I'm not sure if the applicant is present.
He is.
Okay, I may defer to them, but I do know, again, I did not include those elevations, but should have been in your packet that they did provide on the north side there where the notch is in the building. Showed some renderings of what that courtyard would look like, but I don't believe it did show those east or west connections. So I may defer to the applicant at that one.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Allen from council? All right. Mr. Warner, are you there? Mr. Warner? Mr. Warner, are you there? I guess we're not having luck getting in touch with Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, I do see your hand is up, and I see that your mute is off. You should be able to communicate with us. If you want to make sure your microphone is turned up. Well, I don't know if there's any other questions, then we can try and connect with Mr. Warner sometime tomorrow if there are questions that we don't have answers for.
Yes. Thank you, Council President. We can certainly look into that and provide some additional information before tomorrow's meeting. Thank you.
And if council has any other questions for Mr. Warner or for Mr. Allen, please share those with Mr. Allen sometime tonight and tomorrow morning.
Council President Weld?
Oh, yes. Hi, City Attorney Nick?
Mr. Warner was able to contact me, and he indicates that, yes, it does connect, and he apologizes for some reason he can't get on audio, but the sidewalk does connect.
Okay. Councilmember Gregor, does that?
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, City Attorney Nick. All right, then I will open this up to the public if there are no more questions from council. And then anyone that wishes to speak to this agenda item is welcome. And again, please raise your hand. And I am not seeing any. All right, then, we will move on to agenda item number 3, a public hearing on an ordinance rezoning property located at 100 North Farwell Street, the railroad lot, from P Public to CBDP, and to adopt the general development plan with a site plan for a mixed-use building. Again, good evening, Mr. Allen.
Good evening again, Council President Weld and members of the council. Again, before you this evening is a request to approve rezoning from the current P Public to Central Business District with planned development for CBDP, and for the site plan for 5-story mixed-use development at 100 North Farwell Street, which is also known as the railroad lot. The property itself, let me jump ahead to the next slide. Shown here, item number 6 in the middle of the screen. Jump to the next slide, please. Aerial shown here. The property itself is just over 1 acre in size, and as we know, is currently being utilized for a public parking lot. And on the north edge, there are 2 patios for existing businesses as well. There's also a kind of a grass area or vacant area to the northwest portion of this, and the parking lot itself and this property itself as a whole does connect to the trail immediately to the south, which is also a separate parcel right along the Eau Claire River. Move to the next slide, please. This shows just the properties that were directly notified of the public hearings, both at Plan Commission and here this evening. And again, similarly, we're notified through the process in terms of other approvals that I'll get through here shortly. Do want to note too, the property did have public hearing public hearing notice signs placed at the property as well. And again, I'll include some of that in some of the timeline of this project and process here shortly. Move to the next slide, please. Here's the overall site plan. Just again, we'll kind of park on this just for a moment and take a look at what's being proposed currently. You've seen a few other versions of this throughout some of the discussion process, both with the proposals that were submitted as part of the RFP process last year, and then also moving forward with the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, with the current developer. Submitted the applications before you this evening. So with that, can I get a little bit more of the detail of the proposal itself? I do believe Rose Schroeder is also on the line. You can provide some additional information if there are questions. She represents Bolton and Mank as part of the project team from Merge Urban Development. And this is again in coordination with the City of Eau Claire, since the City of Eau Claire is still technically the property owner. And again, together requesting approval of rezoning and site plan for mixed-use development project. Again, this is located between North Barstow Street on the west or left of your screen there, and North Farwell Street to the east or the right of the screen, and north of the Eau Claire River, which is shown a little bit to the bottom of the screen there. The city's recreational trail and greenway extends along the south side of the project, and again along the north side of the Eau Claire River here. Again, the parcel is currently owned by the city, and the staff report to the Plan Commission, before we did a little more research on the timeline, stated that was approximately 12 months ago. It's actually more like 18 months ago and then some. City prepared some proposals, and it was actually March of last year, prepared the actual request for proposals to seek applications to redevelop the existing parking lot into the mixed-use development. The proposal submitted by Merge Urban Development Group was selected by the City Council, and the developers in the city have since entered into the MOU as noted for the project to go forward pending the rezoning and site plan approval before you here tonight and tomorrow. The proposed development includes approximately 8,600 square feet of commercial space on the first floor, which would include a restaurant on the west end, on the left there, service businesses and some retail. The project or proposal here is indicating kind of a new hybrid type of micro retail. So anywhere from around 400 square feet or smaller perhaps in some of the central areas. And the applicant may be able to answer some questions more about what that is intended to look like long term. But also importantly, does include 76 residential units on the upper 4 floors. That unit mix includes 28 studios, 32 one-bedrooms, and 16 two-bedrooms. In addition, a lower level or basement would provide parking for 41 vehicles, and also includes surface parking, as you see here, the north half or north side of the project for 32 vehicles. The developer would also enter into agreement with the city to lease another 25 spaces in the North Barstow parking ramp located directly to the west of the property. 16 bicycle service parking spaces are also proposed, along with 40 interior bicycle parking spaces. We'd skip ahead now to some of the renderings. Thank you. This is the general schematic of the both the north and on the top and the south and the bottom. So the south is what you would see from the river, the north is what you'd see from the parking area and from the existing businesses to the north. We can jump to the next. The east or Farwell side is on the left-hand side there, and the west or Barstow Street side is on the right. We can skip to the next. Thank you. And this shows, we can stop here for just a moment. This is the southwest view of the building facing the river. So you can see there the existing trails and then a connection to this property to the bottom right, along with some of the proposed landscaping that'd be facing along the river, and then also along Barstow Street here on the left. So this is looking from the southwest, looking to the northeast. The building is contemporary in design, as you can tell, with a variety of exterior building materials, colors, and textures. It includes multiple windows overlooking the river. Materials include a mix of brick, masonry, white cement board, which is what you see here in the upper levels, and vertical corrugated metal panels, primarily on the lower levels, and also providing some kind of a separation between different sections of the building in a vertical sense. Balconies are also provided in certain areas with wood slat guardrails. There'd also be some lower level retail awnings, which also incorporate some of the wood features. So a mix of materials, as you see here. The building also features an outdoor patio on the west side of the building, which is what we're looking at, that larger tree there on the left. A public riverfront promenade or walkway along the south side of the building abutting the greenway, which you see there to the bottom right. And a grilling and seating area for building residents and the public in the southeast part of the building. Hard to see in this drawing, but further to the right. If you could skip ahead. A couple slides, please. Here's that promenade kind of connection on the south side of the building to the existing. Thank you. This is kind of the intended thought. There are a couple spaces along the south side of the building where there'd be these walkways and connections from the building space to the public space, and one of those would have more of a grilling and seating area for both building residents and the public as well. As you can see there, there'd be extensive mix of landscaping around the building within the parking area on the north side as well. At 5 stories, the building is approximately 65 feet in height. This was kind of a question and concern that the Waterways and Parks Commission had brought up when they reviewed this a few weeks ago. So we did take a look. Again, there are some nearby buildings around here, as you know. There's the tall 2-story Chamber of Commerce building to the east, 4-story office buildings to the west, being RCU and JAMP, and 3-story residential buildings to the northwest, and of course the 3-story parking garage immediately to the west. So at 65 feet, even with the 5 stories, it does fit in well vertically with a number of neighboring business buildings as well. Again, the site has also provided for a covered outdoor seating area at the northwest corner of the property. And I think go ahead one more. I think one more from there. There you go. There's the northwest patio structure. So this is looking for the northwest corner of the property. It's existing building to the left there. And again, looking to the southeast. This is what's proposed and what was brought before the Plan Commission. The applicant may want to talk a little bit about some of the modifications that may happen as they continue some discussions with the businesses to the north. There was a meeting, and I'll get into that here momentarily, meeting just late last week to talk about a few different options, in fact, 4 different options to look at modifying some of the outdoor seating potential. Again, this was a potential that was presented here from the developer, and they were able to have some discussions with city staff and the neighboring businesses to the north to look at a few different options to either maintain, expand, or reconfigure the existing patios to continue that type of use more immediately adjacent to those businesses. If we can jump back several slides to the site plan. I think one more. There we go. Thank you. You can see it's not really shown, but kind of that pergola, kind of enclosed area to the northwest there. It's kind of a lighter gray. That was the area in question. But you can see the existing building, kind of a hatched border to the right of that. Again, the parking lot would be expanded to the full boundaries of the property, which again, the current patios do extend into current city property on that railroad lot. And should note, and again, I'll talk about that in the timeline, that the lease arrangement for those patios to be on the city property did expire at the end of last year. So kind of in this in-between time, looking at some additional options that could be considered to provide some more direct outdoor seating for those businesses, rather than what you see here, again, was shown in that rendering, was something that's a little bit more separate. It's, again, you'd have to go outside of those businesses and then walk along that building or along the parking, past the trash enclosures that's proposed, to that outdoor seating area. So even though the outdoor seating area is larger, about 1,500 square feet, larger than what's currently provided by those 2 businesses, it is certainly more detached, more of a kind of a, I want to say public open space, but again, less branded, so to speak, and connected to those existing businesses. So with that, again, that area in question has had some additional discussion even since the last the Plan Commission reviewed this last Monday. But with that, the Plan Commission has recommended approval 7-2. And I can certainly get into some of the more details with the actual site. Engineering staff has provided some additional review and input as well. But I did want to highlight an additional memorandum that was sent to you from Aaron White, Economic Development Manager, last week, as he was assisting with coordinating that meeting, as I mentioned, with the developer, city staff, and the business owners and property owner to the north. Did want to highlight again, back December, if you can believe it or not, December of 2018, there was a city council discussion talking about this lot, this property as possible excess land. It was declared as such in February of last year. RFP was released and proposals were received, 4 of them in March. Staff reviewed those in April, and it was August of last year that the MOU with Merge Urban Development, the applicant here, was executed. So, we could jump ahead a little bit. We do have some other slides that do show some of those original submittals, kind of preliminary draft submittals of the site plan. If there are any questions, kind of how it transitioned. This shows, pause here just a moment, this shows some of that parking availability. The applicant did look at kind of an analysis of parking needs and access to parking. And so they're showing kind of what is available along the street and in the public parking garage, as well as in relation to the existing property. Move to the next slide, thank you. This is what was submitted with the response to the RFP. Again, just showing a general layout. At the time, on the east side, or east end, there was a bank user being proposed. That's no longer the case. And they also were looking at perhaps squeezing long-term, and that may still be the case, in the northwest corner, a potential commercial building. Let's skip ahead to one more. And this is what was presented. We were talking about the MOU last August. This is some of the information that was presented as a part of that. So I do want to include that as well. I don't think that's the last of the slides. Thank you. If you don't mind going back to one of the elevations. One more. There we go, thank you. Yeah, park there. So again, that was last August. Then there was discussions. Again, City Attorney Nick was involved with those, as well as Economic Development Manager Aaron White was involved in some of those as well. Last October, in terms of advising the property owner that patio lease was going to expire at the end of December, which it did. In November, there were meetings as well. There's further discussion, and in January, talking about the TID 8 amendment and the railroad lot project. There was public presentations and press on that in January. City Council then did have discussion on the merge proposal at the end of January. There was further discussion with the property owner to the north throughout February and into March. And in middle of March, Merge Urban Development did sign their development agreement, and then that was approved by City Council at your March 24th meeting. And since then, here we are, first part of August, reviewing the kind of final proposal with the rezoning, general development plan, and site plan. I did include as well, or Mr. White included in the memo, as part of the timeline, some of the public hearing notices that I mentioned earlier, when those occurred in mid-July, July 17th, July 20th, and then the 22nd, Waterways and Parks Commission recommended approval, a vote of 4-3. And then last Monday, Plan Commission recommended approval, 7-2. And then this past Thursday, staff met with the project team, as well as the building owner and tenants located to the north, and provided 3 options, and are actually looking at drawing up a 4th option, perhaps for review at a later date, which may provide some additional shared trash services for the full block, and not just shared with the central businesses there as well. So there's a 4th option in terms of drawing out how patios could lay out longer term. That's being considered as well. Again, there are a number of questions that came up at Plan Commission. Happy to dive into a little bit more detail of those if so desired. But that's kind of the long and the short of it. And again, just wanted to emphasize the fact that there have been, again, increased and enhanced discussions with the property owners to the north and tenants as well, to be focused on preserving those outdoor spaces. And again, did want to acknowledge though that this project has been discussed ever since, again, December of 2018, and it has evolved over time, and that again there have been discussions and considerations made moving forward. So the applicant has tried to take that into account. Again, looking at that outdoor patio space as a separate area in use, but again now having some additional discussions that how that would function more specifically with those businesses in question. So again, just want to acknowledge that there's been discussions ever since the last many months, but again have had some additional detail come forward here very recently as well. So with that, again, don't want to miss the fact that we'd be talking about 76 residential units. May defer to the applicant to talk a little bit more about kind of how those fall into what they call attainable housing. So kind of a workforce housing concept, but attainable housing, so very, looking at market rate, but also some variations based on size in particular. And the fact that, again, they're looking at kind of a new model for this micro retail concept in the middle, establishing an additional restaurant user along the river with that outdoor space as well. And again, taking into account that there be that public-private interaction with the trail to the south. And with that, I think I hit most of the key items, but certainly happy to answer your questions if there are any.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Allen. Councilmember Worthman, did you have a question?
Thank you, Council President Weld. Thank you, Mr. Allen, for the proposal presentation this evening. Wanted to ask two questions. The first is around this issue with the patio spaces. As you know, in the last few weeks, we've received a very lengthy petition, and a number of folks have reached out to city council members about the impact and how important the patio spaces are in this. And, to me, I think there's a win-win opportunity here to make sure that, we're preserving them, but also, looking very seriously at approving this project. But I wanted to get clarification about how long has the landlord and property owners to the north known about this patio configuration, and that there was a change happening, because it seemed to me by some people's communication and outreach that this came up in the last couple of weeks. But I get the sense from what you're saying is that this has actually been known for many months, if not longer.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Worthman. Looking at the timeline, again, from the city's perspective in terms of our communications that I was able to assemble, October 22nd, not to be too specific, but that was the date on the letter from City Attorney Nick advising the property owner of the patio lease termination or expiration at the end of December. So I want to say, and I may defer to the city attorney on any further details or other ancillary conversations that may have occurred around that time, but certainly at least October of last year. And again, there was actually a meeting with the property owner November 14th, so middle of November of last year, that there was some discussions. And again, as noted, February and March, further discussions occurred as well. And
okay,
again,
that's helpful.
Each time
that gives me a sense for it.
Sure.
The other question I wanted to ask is around the building materials being used in our waterways plan. It's very specific about wanting to use, I would say, strong, higher quality materials for building, including clay, stone, wood, steel, things of that nature. And we've seen that with the Haymarket Landing project, as well as the RCU, using those higher quality materials. Did Waterways find that this building meets that threshold of using higher quality materials as it is on the Riverway?
That's a very good question. There was a reference made from Senior Planner Pat Ivory, who presented this item, this request to Waters and Parks back in July 22nd. Did talk about the building's design scale being consistent, as you mentioned, to the Haymarket Landing building. So there was a direct correlation to that building in terms of design and scale together. So we didn't look, I guess, specifically one for one material types, but as a whole, consistent with that design and scale.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
Council President Weld, can I further respond to that last question?
Certainly. City Attorney Nick.
Thank you. To the second question from Councilmember Worthman, the other assurance you can have, and certainly could later ask the developer this question, but just know in the development agreement that you approved last March, it contains a clause, as we've used in most of our development agreements in the downtown, that all the work performed by or on behalf of the developer shall be done in a workmanlike manner consistent with industry standards, but also consistent with the North Barstow District Design Standard, which we attach as Exhibit C, and the city-approved site plan or general development plan, which you're reviewing this evening and will vote on tomorrow. So there is contractual obligation there as well that holds them to that North Barstow design standard and an expectation that this property from its exterior elevation and site work will be consistent with other projects in this redevelopment district.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nick. Council Vice President Emmanuel.
Thank you, Council President Wells, and thank you to Mr. Allen for making the presentation and the significant work that you've done to outline the city's roles and responsibilities in this thus far. Seems like, well, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing more comments tomorrow, and I just want to say I feel very impressed and inspired by the work that's being brought before us overall. It seems, though, that right now the hiccup in the conversation, and I'm sure it feels more than a hiccup, so I apologize for not having a better phrase, but nonetheless, just a disagreement around the patio space. And I want to get some clarification on exactly what council will be voting on tomorrow. I understand it's the rezoning and to adopt a general development agreement. However, if there's talks about a fourth option, you know, finding a solution for this patio, et cetera, can somebody talk a little bit about, I guess, the breadth of what council's voting on, and then the ability to address, to find solutions at the end of the day, which I really do believe their solutions are there, so that we can, just understand exactly what we're voting on, and if it allows solutions still to be worked on even after this is voted on tomorrow.
Mr. Allen.
Yes, no, very good question. What I put on the screen here is the site plan that's before you. Certainly there can be some tweaks and adjustments as we go along. What I've seen, again, in very draft form, in terms of these different options for expanded patio space for the properties to the north, as you see they're kind of to the middle, would shift around some of the parking there. It may reduce some of the parking numbers, 4 to 5 spaces more or less. So it may be helpful to understand more specifically how many parking spaces would be reduced as a whole, because again, they are not providing the standard requirement on site. Again, there's that lease offer or option for 25 spaces off-site. Again, they can count towards other parking spaces around there, can count towards that, up to 500 feet for residential, 800 feet radius for commercial. But I guess not to get into that minutia too much, but again, that's what I'm seeing, kind of just thinking out loud a little bit, that modification of some of the parking reduction would be need to be taken under consideration with some of these design options that are incorporating additional patio space. But beyond that, I guess it's not really modifying the drive aisle that you see there. It's not modifying access. It's not increasing parking, certainly. That's always a trigger for possibly amending a general development plan or site plan, like we just had with the previous agenda item, where they actually ended up expanding the building, going vertical. That was something that would need to be modified with an amendment. That's not the case here. The building would not change. The access would not change. The parking, again, as a whole would not change, but the total number may. And then that northwest area there that you see here on the site plan, even this is a bit of a blank slate. That too would really not change. That would still remain more or less as a grassed area or open space. So all that to say, really you'd be looking at perhaps some reductions, some of the parking shown on the north side, and you may see a relocation of the trash enclosure. All of those are minor items that could be administratively approved later on. So again, coming back to the original question, the access, the building, the height of the building, the uses within the building, pedestrian connections, those types of things, that's what you'd be voting on. And those things, even with different options for other patio space, really remain unaffected. Does that help? I probably said more words than I needed to make that point, but I wanted to make sure there are a lot of things on the checklist to look at. I agree. Parking, trash enclosure, location, those are the things that really would be modified here.
Council Vice President?
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate that. And Mr. Allen, I'm always in the boat of saying too much, so don't worry. I'm sure you say less than I do. Just see what you shared. Yeah, it's helpful. We'll see tomorrow what council says. I will be eager to hear about that. In the event that there is a desire to support this and move forward, what assurances or guidance do you give to council for at least the city's role in trying to broker a positive solution here at the end that all parties can agree to regarding the patio?
Mr. Nick is on. If it's okay, I see City Attorney Nick's hand is up, and if he wants to share in that response. City Attorney Nick?
Thank you, Council President Weld. Yes, I think the answer hopefully is helpful to both the immediate past question by Vice President Emanuel and the one that she had before that. So I agree with what Scott said, and would just add as a point of flexibility on the site plan or any potential amendment, but still approving the rezoning and general development plan. So one of two approaches: either understanding that parking can be flexible within this site, but then also within proximity to the site, namely the North Barstow parking structure. And there's already a contemplation that stalls would be under lease from merge in that facility. So any parking stalls that might be adjusted on site, I think could properly be picked up, as long as they were under contract somewhere else within the distance. And Scott would have to help me with that distance again. I forget, but the North Barstow ramp is close enough. So that would be one way that I think we could provide that flexibility without needing it to return to council. And another option that comes to mind that, again, maybe Scott wants to comment on, but I think council could provide a further reduction in the amount of required parking. So I'm not immediately familiar with the different plans, but if it's an additional potential for 4 or 5 fewer parking stalls, that offset could be authorized by council at tomorrow's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Nick. Did you have anything else, Mr. Allen, in regards to that question?
Add to that, other than to say, as Mr. Nick was referring to, the 500 feet for residential and 800 feet for commercial can be counted towards the total parking, and as in either case, the North Barstow ramp is within that. So yeah, that's, as Mr. Nick was saying, either shifting perhaps quote lost parking for the options over there, or simply just eliminating that as
Sure.
a requirement would be the two options. In terms of any kind of motion to amend or refer to the patios, certainly again several options still under consideration, but that I guess I defer to council in their deliberations as to how they would like to see that handled.
Sure.
In a more formal sense beyond than what's already, I think, been productively happening in just the last few days.
Sure. Thank you. Councilmember Beaton.
Thank you, Council President, but my question was answered.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't put my hand down earlier. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Gregor.
Thank you, President Weld, and thank you, Mr. Allen, Mr. Nick. I guess with regard to those conversations last week, is there anything that is available in terms of revised site plans or drawings that could be shared with council to give us an idea of some of those 3 to 4 options that we've heard about? And then also part of that is an additional element that's important to me. Obviously it was mentioned the patios, the flexibility on parking and the location of the trash enclosure. I think another important point in that mix is trees. So I guess part of my question is, have trees been part of that conversation in terms of softening that space a bit between the existing buildings to the north and the proposed building to the south?
Great questions. You can see here showing some of the landscaping that's proposed. As you noted, in terms of trees, there are trees being proposed on the south side. There's also the west and east. On the north, with that parking currently with this proposed site plan, you see some of the kind of hatched areas. That would be ground cover, so shrubs, perennials, and such. I may defer to City Attorney Nick in terms of options that would be presented, or perhaps even to the applicant in terms of what they would like to share in addition to this, if I may.
City Attorney Nick.
Yeah, I would also defer to applicant. I don't have any further information on that,
Sure.
on either the applicant or Mr. White, but I wasn't part of the meeting last week, so I don't have any information on those different compromise options or landscaping issues.
All right, thank you. Mr. White.
Yes, thank you, Council President Weld. We've just started looking at the options that were submitted by the applicant last Thursday. Staff was really trying to review, looking how they fit into planning requirements, et cetera. They are very rough drafts at this point, so they're probably not quite ready to go before council or to be looked at deeper, but they would be available once we've had some determinations on which ones fit within what the city would allow.
Councilmember Gregor, did you have a follow-up?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. White. So it doesn't seem like there'll be, an alternative that we can look at visually before our meeting tomorrow. I just want to clarify that.
The applicant, I don't know if they...
Yeah, we could certainly defer to the applicant in that. From what I understand, again, there's even a fourth option that's being considered with a larger shared trash enclosure. And again, with part of my longer comment to Vice President Emanuel was that those are things, and as Mr. White noted too, that could be, I would say, administratively approved, but sometimes are included as part of administrative approvals, especially in terms of lighting standards, final lighting, designs, final landscape layouts and plans. Those are things that can be would say deferred administratively, but can be approved essentially as a condition of approval. And I could see that being the case here as well, even without a final formal list of options to consider for patios. A condition could be considered that would, guide and direct staff, the developer, and the neighboring property owner to, design, as Mr. White noted, something that meets the basic zoning code parameters and can, meet the needs and aesthetics of the users to the north and the project here in question. So again, not to frame up a specific motion for approval, but that's certainly something that could be considered and often is. Again, there's a site plan letter with some conditions of approval, references engineering requirements and things of that sort. They're a little bit more boilerplate. So this would be something a little bit in addition to that, but wouldn't necessarily, again, aside from the parking situation, require any kind of serious modifications to any approval
Sure.
that you see here tonight. So with that, I don't know if Mr. White has any additional information on the landscaping question, if trees or other specifics got into that kind of level of detail last week.
Mr. White?
Yes, this is Mr. White. We did not just get into any discussions about landscaping details. We primarily focused on options and layouts that could accommodate some type of patio space.
And again, I may defer, Mr. President, to the applicant who may be able to share
Sure.
some additional
Sure.
thoughts and preferences.
Councilmember Gregor, did you get your questions answered, or?
President Weld, thank you. I guess, I was looking for some clarification. I think Mr. Allen provided it, referring to page 44 of our packet, which is the draft letter, which has a list of conditions and, of approval. And it sounds like we could add additional conditions of approval and articulate some of council's priorities with regard to, finalizing the site plan. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Council Vice President Emmanuel.
Thank you, President Wells. I could use some help understanding the financial responsibility of changes to the site plan and or the patio. It seems that in the narrative there's, if I understand it correctly, maybe a difference of opinion on who's responsible for what. And I'm wondering if staff can give council some guidance on what should we expect for what that looks like for any potential changes, and then the financial responsibility for who incurs that.
I can certainly start with that response. Others may want to weigh in from staff, but especially with regards to the now expired lease agreement with the city. As you see on the drawing on the screen here, still the kind of darkest line there in terms of boundary line is the city property line. So again, that was more specifically identified clearly through this process. And again, the existing patios are still currently on city property. So again, as we've had the conversations, again, I may defer to Mr. Nick or Mr. White as well. The responsibility for those patios, again, it's an agreement between the developer and the property owner. Not to say that the city can't be involved in terms of, again, helping facilitate these discussions like we did last week, but that's not something that is really a financial responsibility of the city at this point.
Mr. White or Mr. Nick, did you have any other comments in that regard?
Yeah, thank you, Council President Weld. Agreeing with what Mr. Allen indicated, but building on it, the financial obligations of the city are really set forth in two documents between the parties. So one is a now terminated lease with the property owner to the north, And that lease, one, doesn't allow for the facility to continue to remain there, and it puts the financial obligation clearly on that owner to the north to remove that. And so, really should have been done at end of year, but the discussions are ongoing. We still hope that some sort of compromise agreement can be reached, although it's been made very clear since last fall that it would need to be modified and need to work with the site plan that Merge was proposing then and is proposing now to be able to remain in any form. But the cost to remove what's there and modify it into some sort of new format is one that rests with the owner to the north. The other contractual agreement, is the development agreement that the city approved in March, and that does provide for these sort of ongoing discussions up through and until closing, which is expected to happen later this fall or into fall. And again, what it contemplates there is that there might be a small parcel that's either leased or even potentially sold to the property owner to the north, but that the obligation there again is between those private property owners, as Mr. Allen indicated, and the financial terms to be negotiated by those parties. So those are the outstanding financial agreements, and I would just note that what you have in front of you now, council approved the key financial agreement on development of this property back in March. So now it's your legislative oversight in terms of land use, which is not a financial oversight. So you should really let those documents continue to operate and focus on the best possible site plan in your policy judgment.
Thank you, Mr. Nick. Mr. White, did you have?
Yes, thank you, Council President Weld. In our meeting last week with all parties, we intentionally kept the meeting focused on looking at options and solutions or compromise solutions to addressing the patio issue. Financing of any development was initially brought up, and we quickly determined that the first step was to determine which is the best route to make an accommodation between the developer and the neighboring properties to the north. So we intentionally kept the question steered away from finances, that apportionment, as Mr. Nick and Mr. Allen indicated. The financial apportionment of that project would be determined by the developer and the neighboring properties.
Thank you, Mr. White. Are there any more questions from council for Mr. Allen or for Mr. Nick or for Mr. White? I will invite the applicant on. Ms. Schroeder, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
We can. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for your consideration of this project. I think various city staff did a very good job overviewing the overall project. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions, especially I know you don't have these concept drawings that have been referred to a few times in front of you, but as staff indicated, as we looked at some of those options referring to the north side of the property line, some key considerations that follow through each of those, as were mentioned, is as we rearrange some access and potential patio access, what does it do to on-site parking? Can we move some parking lot islands around and try to help make use of some of that? Where does the dumpster enclosures go? All of that, of course, has an impact on the north property line there. To answer one of the questions, I think I heard just in general when talking about those concepts as it related to landscaping, we certainly have not finalized those yet, of course, because they still are very conceptual in nature, but we are working to try to get 3 to 4 trees in that general vicinity, depending on how the spacing works out. So there certainly is an intent to, do some additional landscaping there as well. One of the other questions I thought that I heard with regard to the on-site parking of some of those three initial options we were looking at, in terms of surface parking, the options range from providing 28 spaces, 30 spaces, and 32 spaces, respectively. What I would say in that count is that some of them were not as deep of parking spaces. In some places, they would be considered a compact parking space. We know that within your code, you don't have that provision, but just as we were trying to move parking around without dropping that number and sort of moving some things around the site plan. So I just wanted to provide that. And for reference, the site plan that was submitted and in front of you today shows 32 surface parking spaces. So it was all a balance between how can we make some accommodations, try to continue to maximize parking on the site, and find a reasonable location for trash enclosures, et cetera. So I guess with that, if you would like an overview presentation of the site plan, I'd be happy to do it. I think Mr. Allen covered that fairly well, or if you had any questions about the housing or sort of the micro retail, there's certainly representatives from Merge on the line that could speak to that model.
Thank you, Ms. Schroeder. Are there any questions from council for the applicant? Councilmember Gregor.
Thank you, President Weld. Ms. Schroeder, I had a question about, as you kind of work through some of the parking options, one of the concerns that I've heard from folks is the handicap parking access in the area in general. And would you foresee handicap parking spaces on the north side as well to help with the need of folks to access those properties to the north?
Sure, thank you for that question. Actually, one of our concepts, and maybe all three of our concepts that we're looking at do put some ADA parking on that north side. It's kind of a way of trying to balance the correct dimensions of the ADA space with the necessary aisle width and still maintaining that pedestrian circulation. So yes, we are looking at it. Again, nothing finalized. We're trying to see how we can best fit some of those dimensions into that footprint we have while maintaining the right parking dimensions as well as the drive aisle width that is required by the city.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Schroeder? Mr. White, did you have a comment or?
Yes, President Weld, and to Councilmember Gregor's question, the question of handicap parking did come up in the meeting last week. Ryan Petrie with the planning department was present, and he said there's also capacity to address handicap spaces on the Galloway Street side of the building to the north.
Okay, thank you, Mr. White. Any other questions for staff or Ms. Schroeder, the applicant, from council? Councilmember Gregor.
Thank you, President Weld. Ms. Schroeder, I'm not sure if you would be the person to answer this or some of the folks from Merge, but I see on page 66 of our packet, and I'm not sure what page of it would be within the document that you created, but there's the sustainability strategies page. And I guess I appreciate very much the points about solar panels and electric vehicle charging, passive solar strategies, and other sustainability components. But I was wondering if there's a bit more detail in that category of this building, the sustainability strategies.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was scrolling and looking at this at the same time. I think I would defer that to a member of Merge or Slingshot on the actual building piece of it. It's generally part of the project overall that they look at initially. So I don't know if Joy or Steve would like to weigh in on the sustainability metrics.
Is it Joy Hanneman? Ms. Hanneman?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, yes. Good evening.
Hi there. That is actually a slingshot slide. I would love it if Steve would talk about
Sure.
the slingshot process.
Okay. Will do. Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Hello. Yeah, this is Steve Miller with Slingshot Architecture, and that slide you're looking at is from the early stage of the project where we are advocating for as many sustainable features as possible, and we are due to budget, we're roughing in for solar, so the roof, we're putting in the conduit and the necessary infrastructure to add solar panels, but at this point, it's not in the plan for day one. But the roof is built for it, and everything is ready for solar. I believe we are having electric vehicle charging stations in the parking garage. I'm not looking at that slide right now, so I'm trying to remember what other strategies were on that slide. Passive solar, I mean, we're shading south windows as much as possible, and maximizing views to the river at the same time. Are there other? I don't know. I should also mention that the mechanical systems are extremely efficient. We've kind of maxed out our energy rebate typically, which is a really impressive thing. So the overall building energy use will be very low relative to kind of like buildings. I think that's about it. There might be more that I'm just missing right now. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for that question.
Councilmember Gregor, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, President Weldon. Thank you, Mr. Miller. I guess I was wondering also if there's any particular, is there like any program certification that you're using for this building, or any sort of like a LEED program or something like that?
No, we're not. We do through the focus on energy. There's that's through the power company incentivizes, or the utility companies incentivize that process to lower the energy use. But beyond that, we're not doing LEED.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any other questions from council for the applicant or for staff? Seeing none, this is a public hearing, and I will open it up to anyone that wishes to speak to this agenda item. Anyone that does wish to speak to this agenda item, please raise your hand, and I will call on you in the order in which it is. And Nature Partners, is that? Nature Partners?
Hi, this is Joe Maurer from 611 Fountain Street in Eau Claire. My question has to do with this project's location next to the river. I'm actually an advocate for density downtown and urbanism in general. I think there's a lot of positive impacts we could talk about a project like this. But I would like to know and maybe this is a question for your landscape architect, how does the project address stormwater management? What do I mean? Well, specifically, we've got beautiful rivers, and anytime we have a building project, during construction and after it's built, it's nice to be able to filter the water biologically rather than just sticking it in a pipe and putting it to the river. What happens in those scenarios is you get all kinds of automobile stuff running into the river. And seeing that it is located next to the river, we like to not only see the quality of the river remain, but improve upon it. Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Mauer. I don't know if there was anybody that wanted to try and answer that question, or...
I know that, this is Steve Miller again. I know that we are addressing stormwater quality per the city code. Our landscape architect, I don't think, is on the call tonight. He was out of town. But I know that we are addressing that through,
Sure.
I'm not sure if it's biofilters, but I know that in talks with the planning department, and the parks and waterways, we are addressing those per the city requirements.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Wolfgram.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Good evening.
Good evening, Council President Weld and members of the City Council. My name is Susan Wolfgram. I live at 550 Graham Avenue, downtown Eau Claire. I sit on the Plan Commission, and I'm co-chair of the Jonah Affordable Housing Task Force. I was one of the 2 no votes at Plan Commission recommending a postponement, not because I am opposed to the Andante project, but because it is worth the time before a final vote to work out differences between all parties in response to overwhelming community concern. This concern is demonstrated by over 3,500 petition signers as of this afternoon, almost equally divided between City of Eau Claire residents and Eau Claire County and surrounding Chippewa Valley. I started being contacted by community members August 1st in advance of the August 3rd Plan Commission meeting. Our community expressed 3 primary areas of concern. The first was to support the small businesses in that area by preserving a certain number of parking stalls in the lot. The second was a concern that the housing units proposed be affordable, and the third was to preserve the patio spaces of Galloway Grill and Scooters, 2 inclusive cultural spaces in our city. I would like to just briefly address each one. Regarding parking to support the small businesses in the vicinity, the parking in the lot has been described by staff as underutilized. However, I am not clear if there was a study done on how utilized the lot is on what days and times. Regarding affordability of the units, MERGE is building attainable market rate housing, not affordable housing. I would recommend that MERGE put in their narrative the definition of attainable housing and take out the word affordable on page 46, since they have referred to market rate in their presentations. Attainable housing has not been a commonly used term in our community. Using the definition that the Urban Land Institute uses, attainable housing is housing serving moderate income working families. Specifically, it includes housing built for households earning 80 to 120% of the area median income and built without tax incentives or subsidies. By contrast, affordable housing is defined as housing for rent or for sale, where monthly housing costs do not exceed 30% of income, including utilities. Incentives to build affordable housing, including the WHEDA tax credits, have been increasingly more difficult to obtain, motivating cities to be creative and nimble in collaborating with developers to build affordable housing. Eau Claire's AMI and CMI are currently hovering close to $60,000 a year, which means that these units will serve those with incomes between $48,000 and $72,000 a year. Originally, MERGE's RFP indicated a percentage of units at 50 to 60%, which would serve those making $30,000 to $36,000 per year, a more mixed income community. Given the high number of lower income workers in our downtown, many in the hospitality field and employed in small businesses, and often not able to find full-time employment, traveling outside of downtown to find housing, and now profoundly impacted by COVID-19, I would encourage MERGE to set aside a select number of their 76 units for our workers in this income range. Regarding Galloway Grill and Scooters patio spaces, I support a city planning strategy that integrates cultural spaces in our city that serve diverse communities. In the 2015 book, Planning and LGBTQ Communities, part of a broader arc in urban studies encourages the broadening of inclusion. The Galloway Grill and Scooters are two of these cultural spaces that not only serve our LGBTQ community, but are part of our greater diverse spaces in the city, blending into majority culture. These two businesses are also part of our rich downtown culture. The Galloway Grill since 2007, and Scooters has been a part of our diverse downtown culture since 1997, entering their 24th year. The attached patio spaces are integral components of these two businesses and core to their survival given the uncertainty of the risks posed by COVID-19. According to the Leader Telegram yesterday, the sit-down between all parties that occurred Thursday, MERGE provided 3 options for site plan modifications to compromise with the neighbors. It was also noted that the costs associated with the compromises between MERGE and the neighboring businesses may turn into a quote-unquote sticking point. At this apparent impasse and in the spirit of win-win, I would recommend that a mediator be brought into this process, someone without a vested interest, and that a final vote not be taken until an updated site plan can be provided for your review after an agreement is brokered. It is not enough from my perspective in response to our community to vote and trust that an agreement will be worked out in the future. I want to end with the quote on page 53 of the MERGE narrative that provides a context for Andante integrating into our downtown. I quote, "The building with a lively building edge is connected, part of the social fabric, part of the downtown, part of lives of all people who live and move around it. If the edge fails, then it never becomes lively." Thank you for your consideration of my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf-Cram. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this agenda item? And I am not seeing any. All right, we will move on to agenda item number 4, which is a public discussion on an ordinance amending Chapter 9.38 entitled Smoking and other various ordinances of the City of Eau Claire as it relates to vaping and the use of electronic smoking devices. Good evening, Ms. Giese, are you there?
I am here.
Good evening.
Thank you, Council President Weld, and good evening, council members. I am sharing with you a proposed update to city ordinance related to the current smoking ordinance and other ordinances in the City of Eau Claire. This is an update to code in Chapter 8 and 9. And it's been 10 years, it's hard to believe, since the state passed the smoke-free air law. Some of you may remember that in Eau Claire, my predecessors, but probably many of your predecessors as well, worked together to pass that smoke-free air ordinance in Eau Claire before the state ordinance. Many of us have thought in our community and across the state that when the state passed the smoke-free air law, that it included vaping and e-cigarettes as it progressed over time. It in fact doesn't. The state law does not include the use of vaping products or e-cigarettes as part of its clean indoor air, smoke-free air law. So today I'm coming to you along with many community partners to advocate for the inclusion of language in the existing ordinances in Chapter 8 and 9 for the city. Many other communities have done this, La Crosse, Oshkosh most recently, but Wausau, Janesville, and Madison are a few of the cities and communities across the state who have added similar ordinance changes to their local ordinance. The goal was to bring this to you in March, and our community partners were ready to do that then, and the health department unfortunately had to ask that we delay that for probably obvious reasons to all of you. But the partners really came forward again and said, it's time, we need to move this forward, and will you please bring it to City Council? So that is what we are doing tonight and asking for the vote again tomorrow. The slide is moved forward. I'll share with you the primary changes that are being asked for, and it's really adding into the definitions. There are other changes as well, but the primary changes are adding into the definitions smoking as including heated cigarettes or lighted tobacco products, as well as electronic smoking devices, which you see here in P of the existing Chapter 8. And in the next slide, you'll see an additional update in R to add a definition for electronic smoking devices. The addition of these definitions and the addition of the changes throughout the other parts of Chapter 8 and 9 effectively make the inclusion of vaping and e-cigarettes as part of the existing city code related to indoor tobacco product and smoking product use. If you move to the next slide, the obviously question for many might be, why are we doing this? Across the state, there is a strong push from American Lung Association, American Heart Association, and American Cancer Association to look at ways to make clean indoor air possible for everyone. With a drastic increase in vaping product use in a survey done with Eau Claire County high school students, you see the slide in front of you in 2019, ever use of e-cigarettes is almost at 40%. And current use of e-cigarettes is at almost 20%. We have seen an increase of 142% increase in use of e-cigarettes by 142% from 2015 to 2019. We have many more people, especially young people in this community and across the nation, utilizing e-cigarettes and vaping products. The science behind these products is such that really the aerosol from an e-cigarette contains all kinds of products that can be harmful to health. And the secondhand intake of those products is a concern in public spaces. We created a new norm with cigarette use in indoor spaces with our smoke-free air laws 10 years ago. And the same applies to this product. It wasn't a product that existed in the way it does now back 10 years ago, but it's really seen broadly by health professionals and others as a specific concern in this community and many. In your packet, you see a number of letters of support. This has been a community conversation for more than a year. Our statewide organization partners are working collaboratively to address this issue through local policy. And local community members have had extensive conversations about the addition of this language in the city code and in the chapters that were referenced previously. You'll see in the packet that there have been conversations and communication broadly in the community, and there are letters of support from healthcare, from the police and fire departments, from UW Eau Claire, both administration and student groups, Eau Claire School District, some businesses in our community, and then some large partnership groups that exist. The Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention, which is a partnership group that's existed for many years around youth substance misuse, and Eau Claire Healthy Communities. The Board of Health recommended that the City Council move this forward for approval at the June meeting. And the request is to consider this at your meeting tomorrow as a way to continue to encourage healthy communities in Eau Claire. So thank you for that time, and I certainly can answer questions.
Are there any questions from council? From Skeezy? Okay, any questions from council? I do not see any questions, Ms. Skeezy. Thank you. Again, this is a public discussion, and if there's anyone here that wishes to speak to this agenda item, Ms. Wilson, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Kate Wilson. I live at 602 East MacArthur Avenue in Eau Claire. I work as a health educator at UW Eau Claire, and I'm also a parent and a community member. We've lived here for about 12 years now. And I'm here to speak in favor of this proposed ordinance. Big tobacco really got us a few years back, just when we had smoking rates on the decline, after so much work had been done to reverse the horrible health trends that big tobacco caused and profited from, we let ourselves get duped again. Big tobacco came out with a great new product they claimed wasn't unhealthy, and it sidestepped all clean air laws, and now we're playing catch up. So we know now that, like traditional cigarettes, vape devices contain and release nicotine and other chemicals, including formaldehyde and a host of other chemicals. They're not good for the health of both the users and people around those users. I'm not going to get into the weeds because I can see you got a lot of details about the health effects in your packet for this meeting. Suffice it to say that creating vape-free spaces will help prevent people from becoming addicted in the first place to e-cigarettes. It's going to set the norm of not vaping. It's also going to create spaces where everybody can breathe clean air, which I think we all deserve in both workplaces and social spaces. So I mentioned I work at UW Eau Claire, and I'm a member of a committee that was looking at last year a plan to change the smoking policy on campus. Our work was interrupted by COVID, so we didn't get anything proposed in terms of changes. But one of the things we were going to propose was to add e-cigarettes to the smoking policy so that it would have made e-cigarette use not allowed indoors. So I'm confident that that part of the policy initiative was going to pass. It's just common sense now for folks to go smoke-free indoors, knowing now what we know about e-cigarettes and what they put off into the air. And over 2,000 colleges and universities actually prohibit all tobacco products on their grounds, indoors and out, and those include e-cigarettes. So I don't see that trend as changing, only growing to go more in the direction of tobacco-free. And lastly, I'd like to speak as a community member and parent. I don't like to go to spaces, both indoors and outdoors, where vaping is present. I don't want anybody in my family, but particularly my kids, to be exposed to e-cigarettes. It's not healthy for them to breathe that air, and it's not healthy for them to see others using those devices, which serve to normalize them. And I look forward to a time where we can all live and work in Eau Claire without being exposed to secondhand smoke or vapor in any public spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Ms. Winaninsky. Are you there? Donna?
Yes, can can you hear me? I'm sorry, I was having trouble with the mute function on my computer.
Yep, no, we can hear you. Good evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Full disclosure, while I am representing the American Lung Association in Wisconsin, and while our office is not physically located in Eau Claire, we do serve all citizens of Wisconsin who have lung disease, their families, friends, and anyone with an interest in lung health. So with that in mind, I hope that you will grant me permission to address the council.
Certainly.
Every year for the past 21 years, the Lung Association has released its annual State of the Air report, which reports on outdoor air quality throughout the U.S. I'm always so gratified to see that Eau Claire consistently makes the top 25 list of cleanest cities for ozone air pollution. It's something Eau Claire residents and officials can be genuinely proud of. But indoor air is equally as important. People spend 8 to 10 hours per day in their workplaces during non-COVID pandemic, of course, plus additional hours frequenting restaurants, bars, and other local retailers and businesses. They must be assured that they're breathing the cleanest air possible wherever they go. Particularly in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, that simple fact is now more important than ever. As Liska said, Wisconsin just celebrated the 10th anniversary of the statewide smoke-free air law, which protects all citizens from secondhand smoke. Eau Claire did indeed play a key role in that law by passing its own smoke-free ordinance before the statewide law. It contributed to the momentum that was necessary to tip the scales for a statewide law. And now as we look back, we wonder how smoking in public places was ever considered normal. But even as recently as that 10 years ago, no one knew about e-cigarettes, so they weren't included. Had we known then what we know now, e-cigarettes would certainly have been included, as the legislature's goal at that time was to pass the strongest, most inclusive law possible. Sadly, the current legislature has other priorities at the moment. So we're asking you as local officials to once again step up to the plate by adding e-cigarettes to your existing smoke-free air law. Not only will you be protecting residents and visitors from the chemicals, particles, heavy metals, and other toxins that we now know as fact are present in e-cigarette aerosol, but you'll again be contributing to the momentum necessary to convince state lawmakers of the need to make this law statewide. Wisconsinites in Eau Claire deserve to breathe clean air. They deserved it 10 years ago when cigarettes were the threat, and they certainly deserve the same protection now from e-cigarette aerosol. You have the authority to make that a reality for Eau Claire's almost 70,000 residents, along with tens of thousands of temporary students and visitors to your beautiful city. I strongly and respectfully request that you vote yes on this ordinance to add e-cigarettes to your existing smoke-free indoor air law. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Ms. Wolfgram, did you have a comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
No problem. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this agenda item? Can I ask if there's anyone else that wants to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none, and before we close the public discussion and public hearing, I just need to make I need a 2-minute break, if everyone could just bear with me, please. Thank you. So we're going to back up a little bit here, and I want to make sure everyone's had an opportunity to speak. And it appears that, and this is obviously a challenging time for us. We're still learning how to have virtual meetings, and for our public, they're still learning how to reach out to us with the virtual request. And so it was just brought to my attention via several emails that there were one or two others that wanted to speak in regards to the agenda item number 3, the public hearing and the ordinance. So I am going to allow them to have their opportunity to speak in regards to this agenda item, again with the idea here that that was their intent to speak. Unfortunately, it just wasn't able to gather my attention. So I am going to open or unmute Mr. Mogensen. Are you there?
Yes.
Good evening.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Yep, good evening.
Okay, one of the things I wanted to bring up is if Merch or you guys could share the original proposal that shows where that patio that could be used, it's got micro commercial, and it shows numerous, like 20 trees, and it shows patios for scooters and Galloway Grill in there. I think this was the original proposal they gave to the city when you decided that you were going to go with them, and it also has parking stalls, 112 stalls, 88 stalls below grade, 24 stalls above grade, and this was where it showed a 7,750 square foot restaurant and a bank of 3,700 square feet and a lounge and lobby of 900 square feet. That's the plan that we thought Merge was submitting, and up until last week, this new plan came, but that's what we had assumed was the original plan that was going forward that the city accepted. Could you show that plan on the screen?
I believe it. Is this the correct one? Mr. Allen, is this the?
This one or the other one?
No, that's the current one. No. Show the original plan. Yeah, right there. No. The one that shows Galloway Grill keeping the parking the patios. In the patios. I've got a copy of it, but I don't know how to send it to you.
Is this it?
No, it shows, I think it was dated 2018 at the top of the plan, but it shows the restaurant 7,750 square feet, and it shows the bank.
Sure, if you can just, Mr. Mogensen, just give us 1 second.
What?
Yeah, Mr. Mogensen, this is Scott Allen. We're showing this is the one that was submitted with the development agreement, but there's the one that was submitted with their original proposal in March of last year. And that's the only other one that we have. So we have these 3 different versions. The current one that was submitted for the site plan, and then this one was the original one that they submitted as part of the 4 proposals in the end of March of last year. So if there's a different one that you're referring to, I apologize, we don't have that. So they're the 3.
Well,
this is the original one that they submitted in March of last year.
Well, I got it from the city. I could email it to you so you could show it on tomorrow.
Sure, if you want to forward, if you want to forward that to Mr. Allen, he'll take a look at it.
Okay, the other question is that I was aware of this project. We submitted a proposal to redevelop it. In our proposal, we spent about $25,000 developing it, and we submitted it, and we were never even called to discuss our plan. Just so you know, after spending all this money, we were given like less than a month And I called and called and called and said, hey, can we come in and talk to you about this plan and our proposal? But we weren't even given the time of day to discuss it. I don't know, can you tell me if you discussed any of the other proposals with the other developers?
If this is a question for Mr. White or Mr. Allen?
Well, whoever was reviewing the plans, I mean, we submitted a plan, I said, and submitted, it cost us about 25 grand, and we were never even given an interview to discuss our proposal.
Yeah, and I don't know if Mr. White is not on the call any longer, but just again, something we can try and answer for you. Mr. Allen is here.
Yeah, Mr. Nick is on the call as well, but there was a staff review of the proposals at the beginning of April, so like the week after they were submitted, again, April 2019. In terms of communications back to the proposers, I'm not sure how that was handled at that time, so apologize, I'd have to research that answer or defer to Mr. Nick if he's still on the line.
So can I get you this plan that we were given so you can show it tomorrow? And then the other question is, just so I'm, you know, we feel that there's a shortage of parking in this area already. And the Galloway Grill and Scooters, their requirement is 66 spaces. And if the parking lot goes away, you're short 66 spaces. And it's very vague about what they're going to do on the first floor. They said they're going to use 8,641 square feet for first floor open or restaurant and commercial space. And so the balance of 5,904 square foot, is this going to be used for the residential? Because later in the plan, it says that they can develop micro spaces or join them to a bigger space. Because what have you calculated? No one, you know, when I've done site plans with restaurants, I have to show the site plan and how much my occupancy and how many parking spots are. So have you even addressed this? Because the way the narrative is written that this restaurant, it doesn't say how many square feet it is, because the original one was almost 8,000. So according to the narrative, they could add the corner on the west end and take all those mini spots and put them into a restaurant, which would require a lot more parking than retail or office. So what is there any commitment on the restaurant side, or what is actually the number of parking spots you are minus what is required by the code?
Mr. Allen.
Sure. In terms of the parking, good question in terms of by use. The residential is required 78 spaces. That's including their reductions that are allowed for transit access and bicycle parking. The restaurant, as you noted, without actual seating numbers provided, which actually would be lower. We've just looked based on square footage of that floor space would be 61 spaces, so 61. The other commercial with reductions also that'd be another 7. So on the high end, there'd be 146 spaces required. They provided 32 surface, 41 underground, 25 off-site, so 98 total being provided, and therefore their reduction requested, again, on the high end is 48. So again, that's likely going to be less because of the seating that will be provided for that restaurant whenever that is determined. So it could actually be a lower number.
Or it could be a larger number, you're saying, too?
No, it would be lower. That'd be a maximum.
So you're saying that you will not allow them to go over what is on the plan?
They would have to account for parking at some situation if they did go over. But again, it's based on square footage, it's based on square footage for that restaurant, not on seats. But again, like I said, it would be likely lower because they have not provided how many seats are gonna be presented there. So again, the building's not gonna be bigger.
So you really don't know what the restaurant requirements are at this point?
It would be a maximum of 61 spaces. It could be less.
I'd like to point of order. President Wells, could I jump in here? This is Councilmember Beaton.
Go ahead.
I wonder, it seems that we're diverting from our normal meeting public comment protocol in time, and both in the fact that we're going back and forth between staff and the public. I wonder if the speaker would be willing to send questions to staff, and staff could have those answered by our meeting tomorrow. It would be helpful to have those answers to get those answers to council as well, just so we can move on. It seems like we're going back and forth, which is not something we normally allow in the public comment section.
Thank you, Councilmember Beaton. Mr. Mogensen?
What? I couldn't hear you there.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we're just. I guess at this point, if there's any other questions that you have that we can, if you want to email Mr. Allen, we're happy to get them answered and get them to you tomorrow.
You want to send them? No, I can't. Do you want to let the owner of the businesses speak now, or is that not allowed?
No, certainly one more person can speak, but again, if it could just be comments or questions that we're able to answer now, certainly you're welcome. But again, we're trying to keep it to 5 minutes if we can. So go ahead.
Okay, my name's George Popple. I own Galloway Grill and corner of Scooters. Yeah, I guess the main issue here would be the parking and our patios. We are looking forward to a meeting with MERS to try to come to some mutual decision on this, hopefully in the next few days. When I opened Galloway Grill, when I applied for the permits back in 2007, I was required to have so many parking spots, and for them to prove that, I was granted the use of that railroad parking lot for my parking spots. So we're going to even be short even more spots here now. My other question is, will MERS let our customers use this parking lot? Can anybody answer that one for me?
Is that? Do you have any other questions, Jody, or is that just as soon if you had numerous questions, go ahead and share them with us, and then we'll try and answer them.
I guess that would be my main question, like the parking area, would that be shared? And like I said, we can work out the patios in the common garbage area.
Sure. Mr. Allen?
Yeah, I would defer to the applicant on that. Again, it'd be an agreement between then the developer, the property owner at that time, and the businesses there. So I would defer to the applicant if they're available.
Council President, if I could.
Certainly, Mr. Neck.
Yeah, whether it's still considered hearing or public comment, it's an opportunity for the public to comment, not frankly to ask questions. So we can try to provide some of those answers, but usually not in this format. Again, it's a comment only time frame.
Sure.
So noted, but those are things that we can share with council in a responsive format tomorrow.
Mr. Mogensen and Jody, if we'll get answers to you by tomorrow.
Well, I guess I had no questions. We were waiting earlier, and we never got asked earlier, so I guess that'd be it.
Pardon?
I guess that's it.
Okay. All right. We will get back to you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Okay. I appreciate council and staff's and public's cooperation with that. With that, we will move to our public comment period. Those of you that wish to speak this evening during the public comment period, please click on the icon to raise your hand. I will call you in the order in which they appear on my screen. Please state your name and City of Eau Claire address. Public comment period is for those living or working in the City of Eau Claire. Please note that your thoughts or ideas should be regarding issues or concerns of citywide application, and please do not comment on issues that were on tonight's agenda, as council wants and needs to hear those comments during the noticed hearing or discussion. Also, please be aware that during this public comment period, council members are not allowed to ask questions or comment on your remarks, so please do not misinterpret our silence as we are listening. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and then I'll ask you to bring your comments to a close. This comment period will last for 20 minutes unless it is the wish of 2/3 of the council to extend it. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to the public commentary period during this public commentary period? If so, please raise your hand. I just want to clarify, Mr. Miller, I believe your hand is maybe left up from before. Is that correct?
Yep, I'm sorry.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anyone that wishes to speak during the public commentary period. So with that, if there is no objection from council, we are adjourned. Thank you. Good night, everybody. The Eau Claire City Council meeting is now in session. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Anderson. Beaton.
I'm going to have you, Mr. Kerner, if you could speak a little louder and say their first name and their last name.
Okay. I don't know all of their first names.
Councilmember Emily Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Kate Beaton.
Here.
Councilmember Emily Berge.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Christofferson.
Here.
Councilmember Catherine Emmanuel.
Here.
Councilmember Jeremy Gregert.
Here.
Councilmember David Klinkhammer.
Here.
Councilmember John Lohr.
Here.
Councilmember Terry Weld.
Here.
Councilmember Andrew Worthman.
Here.
Councilmember Mai Zhang.
Here.
Thank you. And again, good afternoon to all of you that are joining us here in Chambers, and to my fellow council members that are joining us remotely, and to the community that's logged in or listening via our streaming. I want to welcome you to our Tuesday, August 11th legislative session of the Eau Claire City Council. Again, thank you for those that joined us last night. During our legislative session this afternoon, the council members will be participating either remotely or in person to deliberate and take action on the agenda items before us today. City staff and council members have spent a great deal of time preparing for this meeting, and I have sincere appreciation for their continued work and dedication to this community. I also want to thank Valley Media Works and their staff for live streaming this meeting. To watch, please visit valleymediaworks.org or visit channel 994 on Spectrum Cable. First item of business is the COVID-19 update from City Manager Peters. Good afternoon, Mr. Peters.
Good afternoon, Council President Weld and members of the City Council. Just a quick little update on where we're at with COVID-19 in the Eau Claire community. We'll start, as I usually do, with just a reminder of where you can get the best information, because this is just a touch point that happens once every 2 weeks. And that would be the coronavirus hub that is updated sometimes daily with information. On that website, you'll find metrics and statistics. And actually, the statistics that we're going to talk about tonight should be going live as we speak, or very, very close to that. There's also live updates every Monday and Wednesday at 3:30, and there's a call center that you can reach at 831-7425. And of course, you can also get updates on the Health Department's Facebook page. In terms of where we're at today, we currently have 596 positive cases. There's been 4 deaths in our community, and we've had 30 people that have been hospitalized for COVID-19. In terms of just a little more of kind of where we're at with those numbers, our weekly numbers do remain high. In the past 2 weeks, we had 154 new cases, with 83 new cases just in the past 17 days. This was the second consecutive week of an increase in cases. We had 9 outbreaks in the last 7 days, and this is the highest number of outbreaks that we've had in any one single week. Our community spread has been holding about steady at 36%, and our ability to reach the positive cases within 24 hours is also staying steady at about 88%. In this past 2 weeks, we had contacts with 647 contacts, or an average of 4.8 contacts per case. Keep in mind, those are people that are reaching out in the community to follow up and help manage this disease. So tremendous amount of work going into the follow-up and helping people understand the impact of the disease and how to protect their loved ones once those around them have contracted it. And so a lot of work being done, not only in managing the outbreaks within the community, but just the overall situation in the community. In terms of our, there's metrics, very solid metrics that drive our decision making. And again, this is very current. It should be going live on the website very, very shortly if it's not there already. In terms of there are 3 broad categories that we have metrics for: disease occurrence, healthcare capacity, and also the health department's capacity to manage the situation. We stepped backwards a couple of steps in terms of disease occurrence. And we've had 2 of the measures that had been green have moved into the yellow category. And so we have 1 that's in the green category, 1 in the yellow, and now 3 that are in the red category. Our healthcare capacity, or the ability of our healthcare system to manage cases that are coming into the system, remain green, and that's a good thing in the community. And our public health capacity is both in the yellow situation right now. We had 1 green and 1 yellow 2 weeks ago. So being stretched, but still in the yellow. So nice graphics to be able to look at and each week and see how we're doing in the community for disease occurrence, our healthcare capacity, and also our public health response capacity. In terms of other updates, this last 2 weeks, there were no emergency orders that were written through the city manager's office. And in terms of economic recovery and the Economic Recovery Task Force, they continue to work to support the messaging of masks, that masks lower spread, which equals better business. So strong messaging happening in that arena, as well as helping the sectors continue to recover. There's also been a lot of work done to assist the schools. That of course is a very relevant and current topic right now, is returning to schools and how schools are going to be doing that throughout the county at all levels. And so a lot of work is going in with the health department and others to help the schools and the universities and the tech school go and return to class in the way that they are want to do, but in as safe as they possibly can. So a lot of work happening there. In terms of next steps, as we all know, the governor's order for face coverings went into effect August 1st and runs through August 28th. We are prepared to present a local order to the city council if needed. If for some reason that order is stayed or changes in some way, we would be able to quickly bring an order to you as the city council to react or respond to if the governor's order again is taken away in some manner. We're also working with the statewide task force on local strategies and recommendations for the best long-term approach to managing the pandemic. We remain flexible to changing conditions in the orders. We're making operational adjustments where need be. We're continuing to support the economic recovery efforts, and of course, we're supporting the Respond Together plan that's been developed by the health department. So, relatively short update this week, but I certainly would be open to any questions that you might have. And also, I believe Health Director Giese is on the line if you have questions for her as well.
Are there any questions from council for City Manager Peters or Ms. Giese? I do not see any questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Peters.
Thank you.
Next item of business on is our consent agenda. Do council members have any questions regarding the consent?
Did you have something in lieu of proclamations?
I do. Usually that follows the consent, but
sorry.
That's okay. So do council members have any questions regarding the consent agenda or wish to remove an item for separate consideration? Councilmember Berge.
Thank you, Council President. I have a question about item, I think it's on the consent agenda, item about the grand evening on the bridge at the Phoenix Park. And I thought I heard that was maybe canceled, and yet we're granting an alcohol license. Just a clarification on that.
City Manager Peters.
Yes, good question, and happy to respond to that. So the decision to cancel the grand evening on the bridge happened after the agenda had already been posted and put in place. So the event is canceled. You could either take that off the agenda and just not approve it. If you do approve it, it still is out there. We've had other events where we've approved the condition, but then the event has been canceled. Just in this case, the event got canceled before it's actually before you. So you are absolutely correct. It is on your agenda, and but it will not go forward. And I guess I would ask Mr. Hofer if he has other legal advice in terms of how to dispose of that item properly.
Mr. Hofer.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think, we could certainly, if someone wanted to, we could certainly pull it from the consent agenda, or we could approve the consent agenda with the understanding that that event is not being approved for its alcohol license.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hofer. Councilmember Berge, did you have a follow-up or?
No. I mean, so it sounds like it really doesn't matter. Either we remove it,
That's the way I
or we keep
understand
it on there, but that doesn't really do anything by keeping it on there. So I don't have strong feelings either way. If you have a preference, Council President?
I guess I'm comfortable moving ahead with it on the agenda, knowing that the event isn't going to happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding the consent agenda or any items that the council would like to remove for consideration? Councilmember Berge? Seeing none, then on a motion by Councilmember Anderson, and seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer, the consent agenda has been moved and discussion is in order. Is there any discussion around the consent agenda? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton,
Aye.
Councilmember Berge,
Aye.
Councilmember Christofferson,
Aye.
Councilmember Emmanuel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gregor,
Aye.
Councilmember Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lohr,
Aye.
Council President Weld,
Aye.
Councilmember Worthman,
Aye.
Councilmember Zhang.
Aye.
And the consent agenda passes unanimously. Next up is, we don't have any proclamations this afternoon, but we do have an announcement. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Anderson.
Just, excuse me, my vote wasn't recorded for some reason, so I just wanted to vote aye for the consent agenda. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Sorry about that. City Manager Peters.
Thank you, Council President Weld, and I apologize for jumping the gun. I'm just so excited to
No
to
problem.
talk about this next item. And I also thank you for indulging. Normally, this would be announcement at the end of the meeting, but just in the interest of time, and we didn't have a proclamation, I just wanted to make some remarks about something that is important. You know, public service can be a thankless job. It can be long, long meetings. You can have unhappy residents, and sometimes you can have plans that take decades to see accomplished. And there's an individual who's sitting behind me here who for 36 years has been an incredibly faithful and strong public servant for this community. He's the last of a group of individuals that started in 1984 that included Mike Huggins, Mike Schatz, Daryl Tufte, and Tom Ryder. Pat Ivory hung in there, but he's the last one to be standing with that. And you know, he's just with this group of people that was very, very solid with this community, and they recognized the importance of planning, and they helped create a long-term vision for this community. Pat has been the support person for the Landmarks Commission, the BPAC, and also the Waterways Commission. He's been involved with just about every plan that has been put together over the last 36 years, from neighborhood plans to the comp plan to park plans. And for me personally, since he was here a few years before I started, he's been just very helpful and kind and friendly whenever I needed information about different things. He is our key point person on several items. When I say he is the point person. When it comes to historic preservation, he's the one who has helped us guide all of our decisions for many, many years about historic preservation. He is our sign expert. He's been known to just pick up yard signs that are in the boulevard improperly and throw them in the back of his pickup truck. He is our commercial sign expert, and more recently, he's been deeply involved with deciding when murals are signs or art, and so he is our expert there. He's certainly our census expert. He has done 4 censuses with the city of Eau Claire, 5 in his entire career, and he has always brought us in at the high ranking. We have one of the highest participation rates in census all across the state, and that is directly attributable to the work of Pat Ivory. He's also our local historian. If you need to know anything about the community from a historical perspective or the city, he is the person to turn to. So huge resource, a lot of institutional knowledge, just steady, calm, thorough, prepared, and an all-around nice guy. And I just hope that we can wish him a long, happy, and healthy retirement. Pat?
Well, thank
you for the kind words, Dale. And just kind of wondering where the 36 years have gone. They have gone by so quickly. I just wanted to thank the council, Council President Weld, for being able to work with the council over the years. I've been very appreciative of that. Been very thankful and fortunate to be able, as kind of Dale had mentioned, to be able to work on so many different projects over the years, you know, ranging from the Landmark Commission to working with the neighborhoods, to even doing work with the Parks Department on water quality for Half Moon Lake. And then as Dale mentioned, even the sign code, although that wasn't necessarily my favorite area, but it's a very important area for the city to work in. The other thing is just over the years, being able to work with all the different volunteers within the community, from the different commissions, the committees, the task force, the neighborhoods. There's just so many great people that I've met over the years that really helped make Eau Claire so much better by volunteering on these different committees. And I guess the last thing is it's been fun kind of in my later years here to be involved with, in a small part, with the renovation of City Hall here in terms of kind of getting ready and moving us out to the 3M site, the renovations that occurred here, and then moving back into City Hall. So it's been kind of fun for me to be back here in an actual office setting for the last year, kind of before I move on when I'm done on Friday. I'd like to also thank Scott for his 2.5 years here as the director of the department. We've got along well together, got a lot of things done in those 2.5 years. And then thanking Daryl, who will be going out golfing on a regular basis with Daryl now that that'll be getting done here. So I'd like to thank you very much, and this was kind of unexpected, but thank you very much.
Mr. Ivory, thank you, and thank you for all your years of service to this community. It is greatly appreciated. I know that we've all enjoyed your insight, your knowledge, always having an answer to our questions, always being prepared for every event and every meeting, and you will be missed a great deal. And we wish you well moving forward, and hopefully you can enjoy your retirement and golf and everything else that comes with it. So we're excited for you.
Yeah.
I don't know if council has any other comments. You're welcome to. We wish you well.
Yeah.
And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Peters. Moving on. We will begin with our business agenda, beginning with agenda item number 8, which is initial resolution authorizing not to exceed $305,000 aggregate principal amount of general obligation bonds of the City of Eau Claire, and Chippewa Counties, Wisconsin, for the purpose of financing the acquisition, construction, and improvement of the city's stormwater sewers. Mr. Wenzens.
Thank you, Council President Wells. This presentation will actually cover items 8 through 14. So we'll need City Council to vote on each of these resolutions separately, but my presentation will cover all 7, unless the City Council would like to hear my presentation 7 times, in which case I would be happy to do that. Also, just wanted to congratulate Mr. Ivory on his retirement and thank him for his service to the City of Eau Claire. This is talking about the 2020 debt financing. In your packets, you should have each received copies of what's called a pre-sale report, which does contain information about each of these proposed debt issues. This is divided really into 3 components, and this is to fund projects that were approved in 2020 and prior year CIPs. We only issue debt or go out and borrow money when we need to do so for cash flow purposes. So just because a project appeared in the 2020 CIP and we intended to borrow for it, doesn't mean we'll necessarily be doing so this year. We do try to time our borrowings so that we are receiving that money and borrowing it when the project is going to need to be paid for. and that way we do minimize our interest expense. And just to remind the City Council that there's generally a 1 fiscal year delay between when we borrow funds and when we begin making payments. So, for example, with the debt issues that we'll be talking about this afternoon, we won't begin making payments on those debt issues until 2021. Next slide, please. So at the time that the 2020 through 2024 CIP was approved, the general fund levy or tax levy supported debt service was estimated to be $9.165 million in 2021. With the proposed borrowings that the City Council will be considering this evening, the 2021 levy-supported debt service is now estimated to be $9,078,000, which includes these proposed borrowings and the debt refunding included in the proposed issues. So we've decreased the debt service approximately $90,000 from what we anticipated issuing last year when the CIP was adopted to what we'll actually be issuing now that we know what our cash flow needs are. Next slide, please. So these initial resolutions propose new debt totaling $14.55 million plus refunding of debt totaling $3.275 million. That's refunding debt that was issued in 2010. These initial resolutions before you set the maximum debt that can be issued. The actual amounts that we end up issuing could be less than these amounts. And as I indicated, these debt issues are divided into 3 parts. We'll be issuing Series 2020A debt at $11.03 million, 2020B at $2.105 million, and 2020C at $4.69 million. Next slide, please. So the 2020A debt issue will be tax-exempt general obligation bonds for several different purposes. We have street improvements at about $3.1 million, TID number 13 infrastructure improvements at about $3.06 million, fire equipment at $995,000, parks and public grounds at $285,000, and stormwater improvements at $305,000. Next slide, please. Also contained within the 2020A debt issue is the refunding of 2010A debt issues at $3.275 million. This refunding, or what might be more commonly referred to as refinancing, is being done for interest savings only. That is, we're not extending the period of the original debt issue or changing the payment plan, but we're just doing it for interest savings. Interest savings are estimated to be about $320,000 over the remaining 10 years of that issue. Interest rates for the 2020A debt issue are estimated to be 1.961%. Next slide, please. So the 2020B debt issue will be tax-exempt general obligation promissory notes for the following purposes. Street improvements, which will be repaid from special assessments at $1.04 million. Transit expenses at $755,000, and land, building, and equipment at $310,000. The interest rate on the 2020B debt issue is estimated to be 1.458%. The difference between the 2020A and B issues is that the A issue is for tax-exempt bonds, which have a maximum maturity of 20 years, and the 2020B issue, which are notes, promissory notes, that have a maximum maturity of 10 years. That's also why the interest rate is about 500 basis points less for the promissory notes than the general obligation bonds. Next slide, please. And finally, the 2020 C debt issue. These are taxable general obligation bonds for the following purposes. Acquisition of land in TID number 9 at $3.28 million. A developer incentive within TID number 13 at $810,000. Parking improvements within TID number 11 at $460,000. And improvements at Hobbs Ice Arena totaling $140,000. Now, these are taxable general obligation bonds as opposed to tax-exempt bonds and notes, which were in the A and B series issues. And therefore, the interest rates are estimated to be a little bit higher at 2.538%. Next slide, please. In terms of the impact on the property tax levy and the impact on a average homeowner within the city of Eau Claire, with these debt issues, the 2021 general fund debt levy would increase by about $436,000 from the 2020 actual levy. The owner of a home assessed at $174,000 would pay approximately $14.17 more in property taxes in order to pay for this debt service. Next slide, please. And in terms of the calendar for this issue, it's August 11th, and we're doing the initial resolution. As I indicated before, this establishes the maximum amount for these debt issues. The actual amount we issue could end up being slightly less. Following the initial resolution, we'll be going through a bond rating process, and also our financial advisor will be preparing what's called a preliminary official statement, which is really the document that goes out to potential investors that might be interested in purchasing these bonds. We will have a competitive sale, and then on September 22nd, the City Council will be asked to award the bonds to the low bidders. We expect to close on the bond sale on October 15th. That would be the date that we actually receive the funds. Next slide, please. With that, I would be happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions from council? Mr. Wenzans, I do not see any questions. Thank you very much. We may still have questions as we go through these individually. So on a motion then by Councilmember Beaton and seconded by Councilmember Zhang, agenda item number 8 is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Berge?
Aye.
Councilmember Christopherson?
Aye.
Councilmember Emanuel? Councilmember Emanuel?
Aye.
Councilmember Gregor?
Aye.
Councilmember Klinkhammer?
Aye.
Councilmember Lohr?
Aye.
Councilmember Weld?
Aye.
Councilmember Worthman?
Aye.
Councilmember Zhang?
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson?
Aye.
Councilmember Beaton?
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 9 is an initial resolution authorizing not to exceed $995,000 in aggregate principal amount of general obligation bonds of the City of Eau Claire, and Chippewa Counties, Wisconsin, for the purpose of financing the acquisition, construction, improvement, repair, and replacement of fire stations, trucks, and equipment. Does council have any questions for Mr. Wenzans in regards to agenda item number 9? I do not see any. Then on a motion by Councilmember Lohr and seconded by Councilmember Christopherson, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Christopherson,
Aye.
Councilmember Emmanuel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gregor,
Aye.
Councilmember Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lohr,
Aye.
Councilmember Weld,
Aye.
Councilmember Worthman,
Aye.
Councilmember Zhang,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Beaton,
Aye.
Councilmember Berge.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 10 is initial resolution authorizing not to exceed $3,105,000 aggregate principal amount of the general obligation bonds of the City of Eau Claire, and Chippewa Counties, Wisconsin, for the purpose of financing the acquisition, construction, and improvement of streets and street improvements, including lighting, signage, curbs, and gutters. Does council have any questions for Mr. Winzans in regards to agenda item number 10? Seeing none, a motion then by Council Vice President Emmanuel and seconded by Councilmember Berge, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Emmanuel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gregor,
Aye.
Councilmember Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lohr,
Aye.
Councilmember Weld,
Aye.
Councilmember Worthman,
Aye.
Councilmember Zhang,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Beaton,
Aye.
Councilmember Berge,
Aye.
Councilmember Christopherson.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 11 is an initial resolution authorizing not to exceed $285,000 tax exempt plus $140,000 taxable aggregate principal amount of the general obligation bonds of the City of Eau Claire, and Chippewa Counties, Wisconsin, for the purpose of financing the acquisition, construction, and improvement of parks and public grounds. Does council have any questions for Mr. Winzans in regards to this agenda item? Seeing none, then on a motion by Councilmember Worthman and seconded by Councilmember Gregor, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Gregor,
Aye.
Councilmember Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lohr,
Aye.
Councilmember Weld,
Aye.
Councilmember Worthman,
Aye.
Councilmember Zhang,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Beaton,
Aye.
Councilmember Berge,
Aye.
Councilmember Christopherson,
Aye.
Councilmember Emmanuel.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 12 is a resolution authorizing not to exceed $7,615,000, $3,065,000 tax exempt, plus $4,550,000 taxable aggregate principal amount of general obligation bonds of the City of Eau Claire, and Chippewa Counties, Wisconsin, for the purpose of providing financial assistance to blight elimination, slum clearance, community development, redevelopment, and urban renewal programs and projects in the city. Are there any questions for Mr. Winzans? Seeing none, on a motion then by Councilmember Anderson and seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lohr,
Aye.
Councilmember Weld,
Aye.
Councilmember Worthman,
Aye.
Councilmember Zhang,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Beaton,
Aye.
Councilmember Berkey,
Aye.
Councilmember Christopherson,
Aye.
Councilmember Emmanuel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gregor,
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 13 is initial resolution authorizing not to exceed $3,275,000 aggregate principal amount of the general obligation bonds of the City of Eau Claire, and Chippewa Counties, Wisconsin, for the purpose of refunding certain outstanding municipal obligations of the city. Does council have any questions for Mr. Winzans? Seeing none, then on a motion by Councilmember Beaton and seconded by Councilmember Zhang, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Lohr,
Aye.
Councilmember Weld,
Aye.
Councilmember Worthman,
Aye.
Councilmember Zhang,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Beaton,
Aye.
Councilmember Berkey,
Aye.
Councilmember Christopherson,
Aye.
Councilmember Emmanuel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gregor,
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 14, initial resolution authorizing not to exceed $2,105,000 aggregate principal amount of general obligation promissory notes of the City of Eau Claire, and Chippewa Counties, Wisconsin, for the purpose of financing the acquisition, construction, and improvements to public lands and buildings, including City Hall, streets, and street improvements, and bus transportation, and bus shelters. Does council have any questions for Mr. Winzans? Seeing none, on a motion then by Councilmember Lohr and seconded by Councilmember Christopherson, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Weld,
Aye.
Councilmember Worthman,
Aye.
Councilmember Zhang,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Beaton,
Aye.
Councilmember Berkey,
Aye.
Councilmember Christopherson,
Aye.
Councilmember Emmanuel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gregor,
Aye.
Councilmember Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lohr.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 15 is a resolution creating new voting wards within the City of Eau Claire. Does council have any questions from last night's presentation from Ms. Repo? Seeing none, then on a motion by Council Vice President Emmanuel and seconded by Councilmember Berkey, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Worthman,
Aye.
Councilmember Zhang,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Beaton,
Aye.
Councilmember Berkey,
Aye.
Councilmember Christopherson,
Aye.
Councilmember Emmanuel,
Aye.
Councilmember Gregor,
Aye.
Councilmember Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Councilmember Lohr,
Aye.
Councilmember Weld.
Aye. And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 16 is a resolution canceling the City Council meeting scheduled for Monday, September 7th, 2020. City Manager Peters.
Thank you, Council President Weld and members of the City Council. So in September, you have a meeting on Monday night and Tuesday that is scheduled. At this point, we have nothing scheduled for that Monday night, and we're working to make sure that that doesn't happen. So there's nothing scheduled, and unless you would really like to meet the Monday night of Labor Day, we're offering you the opportunity to cancel that meeting. Should something come up, we would try to work that into the Tuesday meeting, but we don't anticipate that at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Any questions from council in regards to canceling of the Monday, September 7th meeting? Seeing none, on a motion then by Councilmember Worthman and seconded by Councilmember Gregor, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Jean.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Beaton.
Aye.
Councilmember Berge.
Aye.
Councilmember Christopherson.
Aye.
Councilmember Emmanuel.
Aye.
Councilmember Gregor.
Aye.
Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Councilmember Lohr.
Aye.
Councilmember Weld.
Aye.
Councilmember Worthman.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 17, under ordinances for action, is an ordinance rezoning a property located to the northwest of Oxford Avenue and Cameron Street to amend the general development plan for Phase 2 for an apartment building with a reduced setback for a project known as the Current, formerly the Cannery Trail Residences. Does council have any questions from last night's presentation by Mr. Allen? Seeing none, on a motion then by Councilmember Anderson and seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Christopherson.
Thank you, Council President. I simply want to reflect on the accomplishments of this particular development, how we have already seen Phase 1 that is ready to rent in September, and now the second phase that is exclusively affordable housing. This is such a great project for the Cannery District, for that TIF. I think that the execution with last fall's early freeze, but being right on time, I think it's just an exciting accomplishment for Eau Claire and another new developer that we can count on for excellent affordable housing. So I'm really proud and pleased to be able to support this project.
Thank you, Councilmember Christopherson. Is there any other discussion in regards to the agenda item? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Anderson. Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Berge.
Aye.
Christopherson. Emmanuel.
Aye.
Gregor.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Lohr.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 18 is an ordinance rezoning property located at 100 North Farwell Street, the railroad lot, from P Public to CBDP to adopt the general development plan with a site plan for a mixed-use building. Does council have any questions for Mr. Allen from last night's presentation or from any other staff members? Councilmember Christopherson, did you have a question?
Oh, thank you.
No? Councilmember Beaton.
Thank you, Council President Weld. I did have a question for Mr. Allen about the process moving forward to work with the businesses and the patios to the north of the project. I want to just confirm if we were to approve this project tonight, that those conversations would continue, and the staff would be working on coming to an agreement that can be agreeable to at least most of the parties.
Sure, very good question. Thank you, Councilmember Beaton. I believe Councilmembers Greger and Worthman, not to jump ahead, may have some additional conditions they would like to add to the site plan approval letter that was included in the packet that could address that specific request. And as noted in information was sent to you a little bit earlier this afternoon, I did gather some additional information from the development team throughout the day today, and try to provide that in a brief summary, kind of 5-point summary. One of those was related to, the first one actually was related to the draft patio options. They did provide 4 of those options and have noted that in their words, they said they feel like the site plan keeps getting better as they have more conversations and continue to refine it. They say it seems like a win-win scenario and it's well within reach. So encouraging words from the development team, and again, they provided 4 different options, again, just as a starting point to have that conversation, continue that conversation. So with that being said, again, it would be incumbent upon the development team and the neighboring property owner and tenants to continue that conversation, but as in many circumstances and situations, city staff would certainly be willing and able to help facilitate some of those discussions as well.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? Councilmember Greger.
Well, thank you, President Weld. Thank you, Mr. Allen. I think my question may be more for Mr. White. I think an important part of I do appreciate, the detailed timeline that staff provided in our packet that shows the history of engagement around this issue of the railroad lot and the future development. I guess what I was interested in hearing from Mr. White is how the downtown business community has been engaged in the process, perhaps through the business improvement districts.
Mr. White.
Yes, thank you, President Weld. We have kept in touch with the various organizations in downtown. From the very start, once MERGE was selected as the developer for the railroad lot, we provided periodic updates to Downtown Eau Claire Inc. or DECI. Also did as part of our meetings with the bid districts, and this would fall in the South Barstow bid district. I believe in Planning Commission we talked about the North Barstow bid district, but it would actually be in the South Barstow bid district. During the executive reports of those meetings, we do talk about projects that are coming up, and this project had been mentioned on several meetings. Not necessarily a lot of tremendous detail in terms of discussion and discussing of the points of the project, but just giving highlights of what was going on, where we were at in the process of negotiating the project. So for the better part of a year, this project has been brought to organizations in the downtown area.
Thank you.
Councilmember Zhang.
Thank you, Council President. I have a quick question here. I've had a few constituents reach out to me, and it's been, I don't know if we've had this conversation, but I would like to ask a question. As we continue to build Eau Claire and bring amazing constructions like this and opportunities to enhancing downtown, it also takes away from parking. I know now that we're eliminating that, we've also eliminated a lot of other parking areas. What are what are we doing right now to address that we're eliminating one more parking spot for folks? It's already super hard for individuals to finding parking spaces down there for, festival, for the fall festival, or just the regular farmers market. It's been I've had a lot of concerns through that. Just want to know how we're going to address that moving forward now that we're eliminating more, spaces for individual. If you would, free parking. I know we do have that ramp, but it's well used by other folks, maybe not by the public. I just wanted to ask that question.
Mr. Allen.
Sorry, is Mr. Solberg on the call?
He is.
Okay, I may defer to him. He did provide Plan Commission, City Engineer Dave Solberg did provide Plan Commission with a little bit more of a parking summary, and we can certainly defer to him perhaps to respond to some of the parking study responses that were provided.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Mr. Solberg, yes, we can. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My computer isn't the loudest, I guess, so I'll try to answer as best I can. Well, I'll start out by saying that yes, we did study the on-street parking in the area. That was included in the parking study that we are still planning to present to the City Council. However, in the post-COVID, or post-initial breakout of COVID, we have seen a reduction of usage in the North Barstow parking ramp by the businesses down there, both currently and estimated future use of the North Barstow parking ramp by the existing businesses to the west of it would be down a little bit over pre-COVID usage. The parking ramp, the railroad parking lot, we do have parking counts that were taken for the parking study on different times, morning peak, afternoon peak, and some evening. I believe it was a Friday evening. There were 70 parking spaces in there, and there was 15 that were used. I believe that question came up yesterday. But generally, as you go with the on-street parking in the area, as you go further to the north and further to the east, it does become available with the exception of Farwell Street, which is an arterial and does not have on-street parking in the area over there. But the North Barstow parking ramp, it does have available parking to suffice for parking spaces that may be required for the approval of the building that is proposed for the site, as well as providing adequate parking for bar and restaurant patrons throughout the North Barstow district. And when we were sizing the parking ramp back in 2015, trying to find the right number, it was hoped that there would be complementary uses with the parking ramp, whereas during the day, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, it would be the office workers. And then in the evening and on weekends, it would provide adequate parking for those uses and restaurants or so forth that would require it for the dinner hours in the evening and then on weekends. Did I answer the question?
Yes, may I ask a follow-up, Mr. Solberg?
Sure.
Do you, right off, because I don't normally park in the parking garage, but currently is the parking garage a paid parking facility?
It is. It is 50 cents per hour with a maximum of $8 per day for a charge if you do not have a monthly parking permit for the ramp. So it is paid for. There aren't times like from 10 o'clock at night until 2 in the morning where it's not a fee collection. It collects fees every hour you park in there.
Okay, so with the maximum of $8.
Correct.
Okay. that does the answer.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Councilmember Beaton, did you have another question?
No, I didn't. I forgot to put my hand down.
No
Sorry
problem.
about that.
No
Thank
problem. Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff from council? I am not seeing any. Thank you very much. On a motion then by Councilmember Beaton and seconded by Councilmember Zong, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Council Vice President Emmanuel.
Thank you, Council President Weld. I want to say that I am so excited about this opportunity for our community. I think that what is being offered here was, of course, dreamt about pre-COVID, and it's hard not to think about COVID these days, but this type of development that is being generated is really right in line where our community has envisioned our city to grow, and that's really around facing our rivers. We've talked over many years about, unfortunately, turning our back to our river, and now here we have another opportunity to face our rivers and to connect people with our natural environment. I listened to the Plan Commission meeting, and I was really struck by one of our Plan Commissioners who shared respectfully that for over 5 decades, I won't say exactly how many exactly, but he said for his whole life, so over 5 decades, this type of development is something that our community has been needing and wanting. And I really thought he said it well, that this is kind of when we take the big picture, this type of development is making a good connection. I also think that this type of development is hopeful because one day we will get past COVID and we need to still be creating a community for all of us to live and play in. Of course, there are some areas of friction that are with this development, and I'm eager to learn about the proposal that some of my colleagues have this evening, and I am certain that there is a good solution out there, and that with the criteria that we have to measure for this development, I think this is really sound, and I think it's exciting to have another developer in town who is willing to look at our identity and our community and see how they can create value for all of us to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President. Any other discussion in regards to this agenda item? Councilmember Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, President Weld. And obviously, having participated in the Plan Commission meeting last week, and spending most of my weekend before that meeting working on trying to figure out all of the challenges with this project, but also all the opportunities. I ultimately voted at Plan Commission to postpone action at the Plan Commission level so that some of these sticking points with things like the patios could be sorted out in a more solidified fashion before it ended up at council. And in fact, I voted against this project at Plan Commission because I felt relatively strongly about that. I am hopeful after seeing some of the drawings that we've received in email this afternoon that there are a lot of possibilities for solutions on that sticking point. So I do want to address actually a few of the other concerns, particularly from folks that responded in the form of a petition and have contacted me before I share a proposal for a motion to amend the letter to merge regarding the site plan. But the main area that I feel like responding to a bit is the parking issue downtown. I guess historically, this lot has been a railroad track as well as
the location of quite a few buildings, actually, including buildings that were on the river that didn't necessarily take advantage of the view of the river, but they were on the river. There were also another 4 or 5 buildings facing onto Barstow Street, south of the railroad track, so close to the bridge at Barstow. And really, this block is somewhat of a microcosm of what happened to downtown over the last half of the 20th century, where about half the buildings downtown were torn down for parking lots, sort of as a way to try to bring more people downtown as the automobile emerged as the primary mode of transportation for people. And it ultimately, in my view, brought our downtown into a bit of a slump, I guess you could say, because so many buildings were torn down and there were fewer places to go. And even though the parking was there, most of the new buildings built in the city were on the outskirts. So our downtown kind of went through a struggling period, and we're on our way back, and we're figuring out what to do with some of that space that we focused on automobile use rather than places for people to live or to work or to play. And we've created bike trails like along this site. And I think this project, being further back from the river than the parking lot is a great use for the space. I was somewhat skeptical about selling this land initially, as probably almost all of you can recall. When we had this initial vote on excess land, but ultimately, it maintains more public space between the river and the building than I was expecting. So I'm really glad to see that. The parking issue, it got pretty. There were so many concerns about parking downtown that, in fact, there was a proposal in the 1960s and 1970s to cover the Eau Claire River with a parking ramp at this location between Dewey Street and Barstow. So imagine if we would have followed on that path and covered the river with parking. That's why we need to be careful about what we wish for in terms of, trying to solve every parking concern that may come our way. So I think this is a good compromise because, in fact, half the parking is still maintained as service parking, and it's meant to be shared between the existing buildings and the new buildings. So just wanted to mention some of that reaction, I guess, to the parking concern. And it's ultimately one of the reasons why I walk and bike and take transit where I go is because I don't want to inconvenience other people who may have a need to drive places more than I do. So something for all of us to think about, I think. I would like to present a motion related to page 44 of the City Council packet from Monday, actually. So that'd be page 44 from Monday's packet because it has the draft letter. And then, so there it is on your screen. So this is the letter to merge, letting them know what the City Council's priorities are in terms of what we'd like to see before the site plan is finalized. And you can see 2 items that are on there under conditions to be shown / satisfied on a revised site plan. The following conditions must be satisfied prior to being approved. So there's 1 and 2 on there already. One of them is related to drainage calculations and the drainage plan. The other is related to the traffic impact analysis. So I'd just like to add a couple more points to that. And Councilmember Worthman has agreed to second that. So I think maybe the next slide would have the motion itself. So essentially, the 3 that I'd like to add are numbered 3, 4, and 5 because they add on to the other 2. So they read,
Number 3, show continued attempts to reach an agreement with the property owner and tenants to the north to reasonably accommodate patio spaces with direct access to the rear properties of 409 Galloway Street and 411 Galloway Street, while providing at least 28 spaces in the surface parking. So those 2 addresses are referring to Scooters and Galloway Grill as the current tenants. And adding number 4, which is include multiple trees within the landscaping plan for north of the parking lot, if feasible. And number 5 being include a sidewalk connection to North Barstow Street from rear of properties at 409 Galloway Street and 411 Galloway Street. And I think what we've seen in terms of what we got in email, these are things that are possible. So obviously the details need to be worked out, but that's my motion.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion to amend the letter to the developer and a second. Council Vice President Emmanuel. I'm sorry, Council Vice President Emmanuel. Council Vice President? Council Vice President? Councilmember Worthman, did you want to speak to this, to the second?
Sure. So I think after receiving a number of phone calls and also this petition, is that there is an interest from a lot of our community members to make sure that patio space is preserved and that these businesses are not negatively impacted. And I think this amendment really encourages the developer as well as the business leaders and Mr. Mogensen to work together to figure out how we can make those things work out in the long run. As a council member from downtown representing these businesses, I think it's really important for us to continue as a city council and as a city to encourage this dialogue to be successful.
Thank you, Councilmember Worthman. Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Thank you, Mr. President. If either the mover or the seconder could clarify something. In number 3, to quote, while providing at least 28 spaces in the surface parking lot, are you saying that they're to have 28 spaces specifically provided for parking to those 2 addresses, or that there be 28 spaces available to be used by anybody that wants to park in there?
Councilmember Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, President Weld, and thank you, Councilmember Klinkhammer, for your question. I think essentially it's just referring to the site plan that is in front of us. Currently, it has 32 spaces. Some of the drawings that we received are up to 34 spaces, in fact, and some of them go down to 28, I believe. So that's kind of the range that we've seen in the drawings so far. This essentially provides a little bit of flexibility, perhaps, to the applicant to go as few as 28 spaces in order to accommodate patio space or trees or enclosures for trash, things like that. So that number could certainly be something that the council would rather choose a different number, but I think this provides enough flexibility while providing adequate parking in a lot that we've seen has less than 50% occupancy most of the time. And to that question of who has access to this lot, I think it was it was stated via email by the applicant that these spots are intended to be, for the use of the merged development as well as for the properties to the north. So if staff may have a clarification on that too.
Mr. Allen.
Yes. Thank you, Councilmember Rager, Councilmember Klinkhammer as well. As noted by Merge today, they are intending that to be more open-ended in its use. So yes, certainly designed and built for their primary use for customers of their building, but certainly understanding that there'd be cross-access, so to speak, with the businesses to the north, much like there is today.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Christopherson.
Thank you, Council President. In this particular amendment, my concern would be the open-endedness of item number 3. If there were two equally motivated negotiators, it's always good to encourage conversation, but this property is actually owned by one of the parties, and the negotiation is toward open use by a second party. And I'm not sure how I feel as a council member to be heavy-handed in making those directions. I really like the sketches that came out today. I think they're generous and appropriate, but I'm concerned about the precedents that would be set by including number 3. Thank you.
Any other discussion in regards to the amendment? Councilmember Gregor.
Thank you, President Weld. And I guess, in part maybe to respond to that concern, I'm not sure if staff has any thoughts with regard to precedent setting or with regard to the wording of this. It is something that I did share with staff prior to introducing this as a way to hopefully not do anything too open-ended, but I think it is something that we have I think a responsibility to encourage the applicant to continue to work with the property owners to the north, just as we do with any project, to work with neighbors, I think. So yeah, I guess I thought I'd see if staff has any response.
Ms. Merrill, could you reduce it a little bit just so we could see the full paragraph, if that's okay? Okay. Mr. Allen.
Yes, thank you. No, great point. Very good point in terms of property ownership and property boundaries that are really being or have been delineated through this whole process. That too is spoken to the final drawing that you're seeing before you here tonight, just in terms of really fine-tuning where those boundaries are. And certainly pointing back to the development agreement, the previous lease agreement with the property owners to the north with regard to their use of the city-owned property for their patios. So all that to say, understanding that, and in response to Councilmember Greger's motion here, staff did review that as well and felt comfortable that the way it was worded here, again referencing continued attempts to reach an agreement, but not mandating a specific agreement or specific option, but simply to, again, make that community statement to encourage continued work towards a shared solution, mutually agreeable solution. And again, the developer responded today and said they think they're making very good progress in that regard. So with that, I know Deputy City Attorney Hofer's on the line and he may want to weigh in as well.
Mr. Hofer, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Allen's comments. To a large degree,
this is a policy decision for the city council to determine whether or not, this amendment is beneficial or necessary. Like Mr. Allen, I read number 3 as encouraging the parties to make reasonable efforts to continue a dialogue where they may find shared interests, but not mandating that either side have to agree to give anything up. Not asking Merge to provide a specific thing to the neighbors to the north, and not requiring the neighbors of the north likewise to give anything to Merge, but rather just to encourage the continued dialogue between the parties while maintaining certain minimum standards outlined in other locations. So I understand the concern about precedent setting. From a legal standpoint, I think this has been worded in a way that does not put the action of the city council at terrible risk. Provided the applicant makes a reasonable effort to continue the dialogue with the neighbors to the north.
Any other questions for Mr. Allen or Mr. Hofer? Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Allen, number 5, they're including a sidewalk connection to North Barstow from the backs of the properties. That is going to use property owned by Merge, and it's going to be installed at their expense if we put that in there?
Let me go back. Yes. I think one more. Right, there we go. This is just, again, one of the options draft showing that connection. This was not necessarily a part of the full plan that was shown to you even just last night. Simply because in the northwest corner there, you can see that green space now. That was proposed, or has been proposed, as that outdoor seating kind of plaza area. And that would eliminate any opportunity for this connection. So I believe Councilmember Gregor was suggesting that however an option unfolds, that kind of connection be considered and included as part of that. So if we can go back to the original site plan, several slides before. Still, yep. I think we have to go back to the first slide here. There you go, thank you. You can see here to the northwest, there is no connection on that side because of how that outdoor patio was configured. So that was the, I believe, again, I'll defer to Councilmember Gregor to further clarify that if I'm not saying it correctly. But again, as you saw with one of those options, lo and behold, we were able to fit in a connection on that side of that drive aisle, whereas now, as you see on the south side by the building, they're just cross connections on the south side up along the building and not up where those existing businesses are. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Christopherson.
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Allen, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but I'm just wondering again, from the amendment that we're considering, and that's placed before building permits can be applied for, how do you evaluate that continuing intent? How do we, so apparently no one sees that as being a concern. So just reassure me. Thank you.
Good question. We are kind of in the middle of the stream, so to speak, in terms of looking at some options and designs, as you saw those last few slides. So we would certainly just defer to Merge, the developer here, and the property owners to the north to see if they can reach a resolution, or they cannot, and they come to some sort of meaningful or measurable conclusion. So it is somewhat subjective, I should say, subjective in terms of what they would inform us of. But we would anticipate and expect some more formal site plan drawing like you saw, those 4 different options. So we'd anticipate something to come forward. And again, it may not look like any of those, or it may be a hybrid of those, or what have you.
Councilmember Beaton.
Yeah, Council President Weld, I just received a message from Councilmember Worthman. He's back on the call but needs to be admitted in again as a panelist.
Okay.
He wanted me to say something.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, I don't know if we can go back to the letter. Was there any timelines as far as they would need to as far as having to come to an agreement by such and such a time, or is it necessary to have?
Yes, as this would be, those additional conditions, 3, 4, and 5, would be tied to item A. So as noted, as Councilmember Christopherson observed as well, that would have to be shown and satisfied and revised site plan prior to that building permit being issued. So again, I may defer to the development team in terms of their timeline for that building permit, but I'm not aware of a specific time frame that they've publicized.
I guess I'm referring to the new language that's added to.
Yes, it'd be added to item A there. So there's 1 and 2, and then 3, 4, and 5 would be right below that. Whereas item B refers to conditions essentially prior to opening the building after it's already built.
Correct.
So kind of 2 different parts. Before building permit, then essentially before occupancy.
I guess I may be asking more along the lines of number 3, if we could go to the new language. You know, we show continued attempts to reach an agreement with the property owner and tenants is by such and such. I know that they need to have that done prior to getting their I'm just wondering, how long do we give each party, how much time do we give them to come to an agreement? Is it necessary to have that? And maybe Mr. Hofer has.
I may defer to Deputy City Hofer, but again, I'm not aware of a timeline that's been stated by the developer in terms of their planning X date for the building permit. Therefore, they've established a certain timeline already.
No, I don't, and I want to make sure if I understand the question correctly, does an agreement between the parties have to be reached within a certain amount of time? I do not read the amendment as doing that. Rather, before the site plan is approved, that, they can show that they've made, attempts to reach an agreement, try and reasonably accommodate the patio spaces. And certainly, I think staff is capable of examining, the documented efforts that were made and saying whether or not, they did in fact make those efforts.
Sure.
To do so, understanding that the parties themselves, it's a private agreement between 2 private parties, and they need a meeting of the minds to reach an agreement, and we're not mandating that one be reached.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Right, thank you.
Councilmember Gregor.
Thank you, President Weld. I do want to go back to Councilmember Klinkhammer's question about the sidewalk connection from North Barstow Street to the rear of the 2 addresses mentioned on the north properties to the north. My rationale essentially is that the city, in our development agreement, are requiring 2 different access easements, in part, for access to other places around this site plan, including the bike trail to the south, but also, at least from my interpretation, like safe passage for vehicles, emergency vehicles, but also for people on the north side of the property. And essentially what this sidewalk proposal does is, you know, as we require actually with all of our site plans, that there be pedestrian circulation that is separated from you know, people having to walk down a driveway or through a parking lot to get to a building. They have options. So I think like we owe it to the property owners to the north to continue to provide or to actually enhance, because in fact right now the site does not provide a safe pedestrian way. I think we owe it to the property owners to the north to provide that, particularly when there's entrances to apartments, emergency exits to buildings, and also from the perspective of some folks, like those are the primary entrances of those businesses, even though they're located in the rear of the building. So that's just something I'm floating here. If anyone on council feels strongly that should not be included, you know, it could always be an amendment to the amendment to remove number 5, but I just thought I'd include these as a package because I think they're all related to each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gregor. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, in regards to the amendment then, to include the language that's before us there, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton.
Aye.
Berge.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Gregor.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Lohr.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Jean.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
And that amendment passes unanimously. Back to the original agenda item. Is there any discussion or questions? Councilmember Christofferson.
Thank you, Council President. Again, I want to commend the Merge Development Organization for an excellent design. I particularly love metaphor and this andante with the way that the window openings are positioned on the facade of the building, and the connectivity and suggestions of ways in which this particular development will be connecting and advancing our vision for a walkable downtown, I think is just brilliant and exciting, and just something that we would want to see along the river. And then I also want to say that this is the developer that's going to be putting affordable housing into the transit center. And I'm looking forward to seeing again what this organization is going to bring to Eau Claire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Christofferson. Councilmember Beaton.
Thank you, Council President Weld. I also wanted to express my support for this project. We've heard a lot of interest in input about this project from the community, and I think that this project has really shown us how we can still move forward as a city, despite the fact that COVID seems to be holding us back. We're moving forward, and I see the city staff and the developers and the community members and businesses all working to adapt to a new reality that makes some of these things harder. And certainly projects like this that started before COVID and now we're sort of trying to adjust. And so I did want to express my support for the workforce housing component as well. We're looking to fight for as much affordable housing as we can downtown. I do think that this is a good opportunity to see a really even mixture of, affordable housing and low-income housing to more moderate rate housing to more of the upscale housing that we also have downtown. And so we know that, the mixed income model is really sets us up for a healthy urban neighborhood. So I'm looking forward to this project in that sense. And finally, in terms of the land use, I think that this project is going to bring such cultural and economic value to our city that is really going to benefit everybody. I think to have this project on this land right there on the river that really seeks to showcase our river is going to serve us better than a parking lot, and especially I think that is going to be an added value despite losing those parking spaces, especially as we have parking nearby. So I did just want to kind of express my support specifically to those things that we've heard, those concerns that we've heard from the community, and let folks know that, I heard them, and certainly their comments are being considered, and yeah, looking forward to hopefully seeing this project go through.
Thank you, Councilmember Beaton. Any other? Councilmember Worthman.
Thank you, Council President. I'll echo that and say that because we had so much community interest in this project, it made it a better project. And I think the amendment that our council passed this evening unanimously shows that we are responsive and listening as community members are weighing in about the vision that they have for our downtown and for our business community, and for a more vibrant community going forward. So, I want to again thank Merge and thank the business community that's working together to figure out how to do this, and especially thank our community members and residents who voiced their opinions about how to do this project the right way.
Thank you, Councilmember Worthman. Any other discussion? I would just like to, again, obviously echo the comments that have been made already by other council members. It certainly is, I think, a great project for our downtown and a great project for our community. I know that, that there's a lot of good that will come from this for the surrounding businesses, and and for obviously the entire city of Eau Claire in the end. And I appreciate Merge and their interest and their investment into our community, starting with this and hopefully in the future. And I think that in the end it'll be another fun, exciting thing that we can look forward to here in the city of Eau Claire. And I think we'll see a lot of people enjoying that area for a long, long time. So if there's no other discussion, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Berge.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Gregert.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Lohr.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Zhang.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 19 is an ordinance annexing land to the city of Eau Claire located at 2040 Preston Road, Town of Union, Eau Claire County, as shown on planning drawing number 20-5A for the Shunk annexation. Per Wisconsin statutes, an annex ordinance requires a 2/3 vote of the elected members of the governing body. Therefore, 8 affirmative votes of the 11 elected council members are required for adoption. Does council have any questions for Mr. Allen? Mr. Allen.
Sure, I do not have any questions, but if you happen to have any, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yes.
No, both these items that are coming before you here this evening are fairly straightforward in terms of annexation requests. This one in particular, located in the town of Union, is looking to annex in order to connect to city sewer and water, which is available along the street, Preston Road, in this area here. So again, fairly straightforward annexation request before you this evening.
Any questions for Mr. Allen in regards to agenda item number 19? Councilmember Christopherson.
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Allen, do we know if there's any intended development here, or is it simply the one residence with
Sure.
access?
No, very good question. The applicant did not specify anything in writing, but has indicated that they may be subdividing it into just a few lots, if not just a couple, for residential development, which again is in keeping with the comprehensive plan as well.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Any other questions for Mr. Allen? I do not see any.
Right,
Thank you. On a motion then by Councilmember Lohr and seconded by Councilmember Christopherson, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Christopherson.
Aye.
Emmanuel. Emmanuel.
Aye.
Grigor.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Lohr.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Zhang.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Berge.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 20 is an ordinance annexing land to the city of Eau Claire located at Lot 1, Block 3 of Gulfview Addition, Harless Road, Town of Washington, Eau Claire County, as shown on planning drawing number 20-6A, Holzinger annexation. Per Wisconsin statutes, ordinance requires a 2/3 vote of the elected members of the governing body. Therefore, 8 affirmative votes of the 11 elected council members are required. Good afternoon again, Mr.
Yes.
Allen.
Thank you, Council President Weld and members of the council. Again, very much like the previous annexation request, this one too, although located in the town of Washington and just about 2/3 acre in size. Vacant land is looking to annex into the city to access sewer and water, which is available along Harless Street here in the southeast part of the city near Otter Creek. So we may see additional properties, as you see here, kind of filling in the gaps, and we've seen a few over the last few years as well in this area. So this is one more single parcel this time requesting annexation.
Any questions for Mr. Allen? I do not see any.
All right.
Thank you very much. On a motion then by Council Vice President Emmanuel and seconded by Councilmember Berge, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Emmanuel.
Aye.
Grigor.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Lohr.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Jean.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Berge.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 21 is a charter ordinance relating to the city council and the reapportionment of the aldermanic districts of the city of Eau Claire. Adoption of a charter ordinance requires a 2/3 vote of the elected members of the governing body. Therefore, 8 affirmative votes are required of the 11 council members. Council have any questions in regards to this agenda item? Seeing none, then on a motion by Councilmember Worthman and seconded by Councilmember Gregor, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Gregor.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Lohr.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Jean.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Berge.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Agenda item number 22 is an ordinance amending Chapter 9.38 entitled Smoking and Other Various Ordinances of the City of Eau Claire as it relates to vaping and the use of electronic smoking devices. Does council have any questions for Ms. Giese from last night's presentation? Seeing none, then on a motion by Councilmember Anderson and seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer, this item is moved. Is there any discussion? Council Vice President Emmanuel.
Thank you, Council President. I'd like to speak in support of this. I think this is a very important public health matter, and I also want to compliment the Public Health Department for their leadership in really getting some comprehensive community support, as evidenced by all of the letters and the public packet that was published. I also want to just share a little bit about, I guess, just a fond memory that I have about a former council member, Mr. Sheridan, Terry Sheridan, who I did not have the pleasure of serving with. However, he and I met pretty shortly after I started my service on council. And when I met him for the first time, he just looked at me, and it was a little silent between us, and he said, well, it's up to you all now. My service is done there, so it's up to you all. And many folks remember Terry as his really innovative leadership to help create no smoking inside of restaurants and establishments. I think the first city in the entire state of Wisconsin. And at the time, that was really bold. And I just appreciate the work that he did, and also a little bit of the passing of the baton to future council cohorts. And so with that, I think we're continuing on a strong legacy of trying to make, as our public health director teaches us, the healthy choice the easier choice, and make this easier for families. And then, of course, there's the COVID landscape that we live in, and really the harms that may come from consuming this indoors and or around people. So I think it's really timely, and it's really a smart policy decision. So I'll be in support of it.
Thank you, Council Vice President. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Lohr.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Jean.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Berge,
Aye.
Christofferson,
Aye. Aye.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Gregor.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously, with even a chuckle, I think. But, ordinances for introduction, there are two. An ordinance rezoning property located at the southwest corner of Old Town Hall Road and Graff Road from TR1A to R2P and R3P, and to adopt the general development plan for duplexes, twin homes, and multifamily residential. Agenda item number 24 is an ordinance amending Chapter 6.15 entitled Keeping of Poultry of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Eau Claire. Does council wish to suspend the rules and take up any of these two ordinances this evening? Council Vice President, did you have?
Sorry, I forgot to put my hand down.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
No problem. Thank you. Seeing none, we will move on to announcements. City Manager Peters.
Thank you, but I have no further announcements tonight.
Thank you. Does council have any announcements? I would just like to welcome and thank Mr. Kerner for his first time as acting deputy city clerk, and appreciate the job that you did, and you did a great job, and look forward to working with you again in the future. So with that, if there is no objection from council, and seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
This program was brought to you by